available on the town website under the Select Board tab. Minutes tonight are being taken by Assistant Town Manager Miranda Bergmeyer. To my right. Brennan, as usual, will monitor admission to our Zoom platform. We request that members, can you get that? Thanks, Jeff. Thanks. We request that members of the public display their full name for admission, which has helped us to eliminate so-called Zoom bombing interruptions of our meetings. If anyone is having difficulty getting into the meeting, please feel free to contact a select board member to let us know. As always, everyone attending or participating in the meeting must focus their remarks, wait their turn to speak after being recognized by the chair, then speak clearly and loudly so that everyone can hear what is being said. People here in Tracy Hall should leave the room if they wish to speak with one another. For remote public questions or comments through Zoom, please raise your electronic hand to be recognized by the chair before speaking. For questions or comments through the telephone, press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute after being recognized by the chair. I will monitor the Zoom view to acknowledge participants who wish to speak, and we will reach everyone who wishes to comment. Remember to direct all comments or questions to the chair, not to other people either on the board or in the remote audience. The order of speaking will generally be select board members, then members of the public here in the building, and then people participating remotely through Zoom. Consistent with our rules of procedure adopted in March of 23, the chair may suggest commenters conclude their remarks within 3 minutes. Before we begin this evening, I would ask that everyone give us a moment of silence in recognition of the sad passing of a longtime Norwich resident and an active current member of the Planning Commission, Stuart Richards. Thank you. The first item, of course, is the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? I move to approve the agenda. Priscilla has moved. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mary. I'll call the question. Priscilla, how do you vote? Yes. Mary?
Yes.
Pam? Pam Smith?
Yes.
Roger Arnold?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. The vote is unanimous. The next thing are public comments for items which are not on the agenda for tonight's meeting. Are there any public comments? Pam Smith?
Yes, thank you. I would like to thank Brennan for helping the posted.
Oh,
Pam, we can't hear.
Pam,
I don't know what's going on, but you're frozen. See if you can resolve that.
I can hear you.
Well, you were frozen, so we couldn't hear you. You want to try one more time?
Oh, okay. I wanted to thank Brennan for helping the trustees get their meeting posted in late December. Unbeknownst to me, Miranda and Pam Mullen were both out. And I reached out to Brennan and he helped us get a meeting posted. And he asked Lily to jump in to
You're still breaking up. So thank you very much.
You should try to turn your camera off, Pam, and see if that will work.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Better.
yeah,
Did
that's
that
much
help?
better.
Okay. Couple of takeaways. We have to remember that the staff is not always available to help us. And so we have to follow up and make sure that our meetings get posted or our minutes get posted. And the other thing is, I was thinking that when people are on vacation, maybe we need to have some kind of a handoff system or a buddy system so that work that needs to get done, such as these postings, doesn't languish. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Bob Harnish, I think you were next.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, my name is Bob Harnish. I'm appearing tonight under public comment in the hopes that we can be an agenda item at a future meeting. I'm from the western side of the state. I've been in Vermont for 65 of my 86 years, and I'm one of the founders of the Vermont Inclusion Initiative, which is a statewide effort asking towns to embrace diversity in their population. I think we would all agree this is the morally right thing to do, but it is also the economically wise thing to do. Vermont and most towns in Vermont, or at least many towns in Vermont, need more population to fill jobs and to grow the grand list. But we need to tell the world outside Vermont that Vermont welcomes new people to come live, bring their skills and their families, and that they will be welcomed. I think looking back at the 2020 census, it shows that Vermont's population is stagnant and we are getting older on average. And if this continues, the state and many towns will not be able to maintain services and infrastructure, such as roads. We need to grow Vermont's younger workforce too, and provide opportunities for our youth who often have to leave the state to find a career. So our team, myself and 4 others, would like to make a short presentation of 5 or 6 minutes. Now that would be probably 2 of our team, not the whole team. And we'd like to do this at a future select board meeting to explain this in more detail and then be available for discussion and questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
One more sentence. We ask that you give us a place on the agenda of a future meeting to learn why 132 towns, representing 73% of the population of Vermont, have adopted a statement of inclusion and are working currently to engage their citizens.
Thank
So,
you. And Bob, I
So
think you said,
how should I proceed to try to get a longer space on the agenda of a future meeting?
well, I think you did send in some material. It either came through the town manager's office or something. I think I've seen it. So
Yeah.
we can put it in a future packet. If there's just something that you want us to sign, then, we can certainly review that in a board meeting. So we'll let you know
Right.
through our town manager's office. Brennan will be in touch with you, I'm sure.
Perfect. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. Lily Trayman. Lily?
Oh, hi. So hold on. This is actually my daughter Miriam who wants to make a comment.
My name's Miriam Simon, and I go to school at MCS, and I just want to comment about the sidewalks, because every day when I walk to school, the sidewalks are never plowed, so it's very hard because we have to walk in the bike lane, which makes it hard. It just makes me really nervous.
Thank you very much, Miriam. Thank you very much. I know that our town manager has heard that.
And if I could comment, Madam Chair?
Yes, we have a comment from Priscilla.
A comment on Miriam's comment, since I always walk everywhere and walk here tonight. Part of the sidewalk was nicely plowed, and then I think the plow must have gotten stuck and I had to go out into the road. And I couldn't get to the buttons, the button to push the lights for the crossing. So it's like, yeah, I'm sympathetic toward DPW, which I think is doing the best it can with the resources it has available. I am also sympathetic to people who say,
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other comments? All right, I don't see any. If anybody else sees some, let me know. Next, we move on to correspondence, warrants, and minutes. The number 2 item is minutes for December 13 and 20. Shall we take them in order with a motion and then discussion? So is there a motion for the December 13 minutes?
I can do that.
Thank you, Mary.
I move to approve the minutes of December 13th, 2023.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Priscilla. All right, Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes,
Mary?
Yes,
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia, yes, unanimous. Thank you very much. And now the December 20th.
I move to approve the minutes of December 20th, 2023.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Second by Priscilla.
Just getting lost in my pages.
Okay. Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Pam?
yes,
Mary? Yes,
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia, yes, unanimous. Thank you very much. We have item 3 is AP warrants. We have 3 of those tonight. Again, we'll take them in order with a motion and then any necessary discussion. Do we have a motion as to warrant number 1089?
I move to approve AP warrant number 1089 in the amount of $70,608.26 paid from the general fund.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Sure.
Second by Priscilla. Any comments or questions? Okay, call the question. Roger?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Pam?
yes,
Mary?
Yes,
Marcia, yes, unanimous. Thank you very much. And now warrant number 1090.
I move to approve AP warrant number 1090 in the amount of $547.34 paid from the Kids Bridge Fund number 53.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Priscilla. Any discussion? Call the question. Roger?
Yes.
Pam?
yes,
Mary?
Yes,
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia, yes, unanimous. Thank you. And now warrant 1092.
I move to approve AP warrant number 1092 in the amount of $16,639.98 paid from the Town Reappraisal Fund number 12.
Thank you. Second
Yep.
by Priscilla. Any comments? Okay, call the question. Roger?
Yes.
Pam?
yes,
Mary?
Yes,
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia, yes, unanimous. Thank you very much. Priscilla and I will sign those. If one of you could pop in and sign it, that would be a majority. Pam, you have a comment?
I do. There was another AP warrant in the packet, was an off-cycle warrant number 1087. I had sent a question to Brennan on one of those items. I wondered if he had an answer for me since I haven't received one by email.
They're in correspondence, so we can get to it then, or Brennan, do you want to do that now or just do it in correspondence?
I could do either. I think Pam's question was related to police equipment that was purchased in fiscal year 24, but had been approved for fiscal year 23. Is that correct, Pam?
That's correct.
Yeah. So we have caught, actually, I think thanks to Cheryl Lindberg, noticing that we actually had approved this last May. I believe it was May 10th. And this followed a presentation by former Chief Cochran, who was looking to expend some of their unspent funding in the police department to buy equipment. And I think at that point, the anticipation was that all of those purchases would have fallen into fiscal year 23. And that was how the motion was made. And what we've discovered here is certainly we're getting invoices still in November and December for the same equipment, which is, I think, largely due to supply chain issues where we just, we placed the PO back in May, but we're just getting the equipment and the invoices now. So I think it's really, basically the fiscal year was closed out. We have had the audit, so there's no way to go back into the fiscal year 23. My suggestion, and talking with Barry, our finance director, about this would be potentially just to hold some of the surplus that we're going to be talking about in the future, which came out of fiscal year 23, potentially up to the amount of $100,000 that we would use. Basically, we've already approved this, but we don't want to overspend necessarily the same line items in fiscal year 24. So that might be a way to deal with the situation we're in. The alternative would be just to accept that we're going to be overspending those same line items in fiscal year 24 for the equipment that was purchased, basically, but has not arrived or been invoiced for in fiscal year 24. So that would probably be my suggestion to the board, and we can talk about that maybe a little bit more later in the agenda when we start talking about the surplus and the possible articles. There would be to acknowledge $100,000 has been encumbered for this police equipment, and basically when we start looking at what we have left to talk about for surplus funds and projects, leave that piece out of it, knowing it's kind of already been spent.
So are you saying that we might plus the
Pam, we're having the same problem.
Pam, yeah, you're breaking up. I can't understand what you're asking me.
So let's hold off on this and talk about it in the context of the surplus. Okay? All right.
All
So
right.
for the rest of the correspondence, we've got an email from Chris Katuki regarding the collective bargaining underway and how that will be funded and which employees.
Well, are you in here?
Somebody talking? Sorry. And which employees are covered by collective bargaining agreements and when the compensation report will be finished. To that, I can just say that the budget is a guess based on last year's wages, and as with any other, in fact, change in costs, the budget has a built-in buffer which allows flexibility when you can't predict exactly. In terms of who's covered by the collective bargaining agreement and when the compensation study is expected, Brennan, would you like to make a very brief comment?
Yeah, I guess my comment would just be that we are working with our consultant there on the compensation study. We're expecting to have a draft to review here at the end of this week, and we'll take a look at that kind of internally in the town manager's office. And my guess is we will not get to a presentation in January, just due to all of the other work the select board has to do between the next 2 weeks. But we could potentially be scheduling a meeting for them to present their report at one of the February regular meetings.
Great. And is it fair to say, just in answer, that the police and the DPW are covered by collective bargaining, but for the department heads?
Yeah, sorry, I missed that part of the question. Yeah, so basically the CBA includes police and DPW workers, excluding the chief and the director.
Great, thank you. Chris Katuki has also written regarding funds to be received as part of the opioid settlement. I would suggest that when those are received, Brennan will work with us to create an agenda item for board consideration. Is that reasonable, Brennan?
Yes, I believe it is. I think we have received some of those funds last year, so it will be kind of a recurring process of receiving. It's not a huge sum of money, but I think it's a regular payout to the municipalities that are included there.
Okay, so we'll think about that for a possible agenda item, I guess. Pam Smith wrote about the fiscal year increase or decrease in reserve fund allocations, giving her opinion about what should be on the town warrant. Part of that discussion was had at our last select board meeting, but item 9 tonight is about warrant articles. Stuart Richards wrote regarding, quote, open meeting law violations, recording his understanding of the history of the Katuki versus Norwich case. Don McCabe wrote thanking the board for support of the Kids Bridge project, requesting the unused funds which are in Fund 53 remain there for bridge maintenance, and commending Brennan and Bridge McDowell for their excellent and tireless work on the project. I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say how pleased we are to see the project is almost fully completed.
And walkable.
And walkable.
I walked over.
Are you supposed to?
I think that's, I mean, I think it says you can. What didn't have anything crossed that you couldn't.
AP
Yeah,
warrant. Okay.
I was just going to say, just for anyone watching who might want to walk over it, it is open. There is still some work that's going to occur in the spring where the ramps that allow accessibility are going to be placed. And for the winter, we just have kind of wooden stair steps that will take you up there. But it is open for business.
Great. Thank you for the clarification. I wasn't sure about the ramps. Okay, AP warrants, which were signed, are the last thing in correspondence. Those were signed when the board was not in session pursuant to the select board decision at the start of the year. And those are included for information only. They were signed by Mary and myself as chair and vice chair, and they're AP warrants 1085 in the amount of, I don't have to say it in the package. Anyway.
Just a comment. I guess I hadn't realized 2 signatures were sufficient, but since I live across the street, if somebody needs something signed, I'm almost always home.
Thank you.
Somebody can call me and I can be there in 5 minutes.
Okay.
You could have had 3 signatures.
That's
You didn't
good.
you didn't need 2. We just needed 1.
I thought so, but we had 2 for safety. Thank you for doing it, Mary.
Well,
Mary?
yes, you're welcome.
Okay. All right, now we are to the action items for motions.
And Marcia, point of order. We have to accept the correspondence.
Thank you very much. All right. Do we have a motion to accept the correspondence?
I'll move to accept.
Priscilla moved. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mary, and for bringing us back to reality. Pam Smith, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Roger Arnold?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia, yes, unanimous. Now we're on item 5. So this is the fire department's request, which is for 3 expenditures. And I will leave this to Brennan and or Alex to introduce.
Well, I'll turn that right over to Alex.
I just want to let all the assembled folks know that I just unmuted myself right now. So, all right. Good evening, everybody. Madam Chair. So 3 items in front of you from the fire department this time around. The first one, drawing from Fund 25, which is the fire station fund. We had some damage to one of our overhead doors, and that bill reflects the cost to fix that damage. The next 2 are from Fund 26, our fire apparatus or our fire equipment fund, excuse me. Those are bills that really are covering the last significant amount of work that was done on engine 3 to get up to speed. One was the radio install, and then as you'll see, the other one is miscellaneous tools and appliances that had to be purchased and affixed to the engine, et cetera. So that's what we're looking at.
Great. We can start with a motion, or if you want to talk, do you have a question?
I had a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, on the first one, about fixing the door, the overhead door. There's a statement on the sheet that says there was a VLCT claim filed and payment has been received. And I look at the invoice. Okay, 515 payment. What was payment received for? If payment was received, why are we?
Because it was an insurance claim, and so the insurance money goes into the general fund.
Oh, so 515 went into the fund, and now we're taking the 515 out to pay the bill?
No. Yes.
Oh. Okay, thank you.
How was it damaged?
Unfortunately, there was a driver error and a apartment door was left open upon exiting the firehouse.
Someone ran into the door.
That would be the other way to put that, yes.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Having done the same thing in my own house, I will not say anything. All right. Do we have a first motion?
I move to approve funds not to exceed $515 from Fire Station Fund number 25 for costs remaining after insurance coverage to repair a damaged overhead door.
Is that true? Is it costs remaining? I had written that, but it sounds like it isn't true.
I'm not sure, Madam Chair, what you mean by cost remaining.
Well, I just wondered if the cost was more than $515 and this was the remainder that wasn't covered by insurance.
No, this was the bill to fix the overhead door.
Okay, so,
I should amend that motion then.
yeah,
Okay, okay, so I'm gonna just start over. I move to approve funds not to exceed $515 from Fire Station Fund number 25 for costs to repair an overhead door, damaged overhead door.
perfect.
Okay.
Do we seconded by Priscilla? Any further discussion? Roger? No?
Yes. Oh, you were.
Sorry. Discussion.
Are you discussing your?
Pam?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I asked for discussion, but I'll take a motion. I mean, I'll take.
Take the votes,
How
okay.
do you vote? How do you vote?
Yes.
Pam vote?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes,
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia, yes. It's unanimous. And do we have a second second motion?
second motion. I
Yes.
move to approve funds not to exceed $3,937.20 from Fire Equipment Fund number 26 for tool mounting on new engine 3.
Thank you. Do we have a
I'll
second? Second by Priscilla. Shall I call the question?
Sure.
Roger?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes,
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia, yes. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And a third motion?
I move to approve funds not to exceed $1,179.85 from Fire Equipment Fund number 26 for installation of radio equipment on engine 3.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Yep.
Second by Priscilla. Any discussion before we call the question? Okay, Roger?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes,
Pam?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Marcia, yes, unanimous. Thank you very much. And thank you, Chief, for coming.
Thank you all.
Good night. All right, number 6, Affordable Housing VCDP grant application. Welcome, Jeff LaBelle.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let me just start by saying the Planning Commission, just for setting the stage here, has several subcommittees, one of which is affordable housing. This is the second time you've appeared before us, and the board will recall that there were some questions raised about the application at the last select board meeting. We agreed Jeff would go back to VCDP to discuss what was required, and we would ask town council to look at this. So Jeff, what do you have to report back?
Yes, my understanding is there was a concern about a statement that was being made in the very last section of the application on the very last page. And we connected with VCDP staff about whether a letter was required in response to that last paragraph. And the answer was no. So that letter is only required when the applicant does not own the land. So for example, if you are applying for a grant and let's say Peter Paul owns the land, you would need a letter from Peter Paul saying, yes, I will give you access to that land to do the testing and I'm willing to sell it to you at a reasonable price. Since we are the applicant, there is no a letter required. And in order to address the concerns that have been raised at the last meeting about the accuracy of representations that are made in that section, we have changed that section to simply say not applicable. So there's no longer any representations being made whatsoever in that section. So we hope that addresses the concern that you've had.
Okay, thank you. So Brennan and I spoke with council, and that prompted some new points, which I want to make the select board aware of. And it underscored some other concerns I had, but let me preface all of this by saying I don't think that any of these are insurmountable concerns, but I do believe they need to be addressed by the board.
Okay.
So first, I'll go through. Council had not read the entire application.
What a piece of paper that I could have. I didn't realize that. I would like to make sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Thanks. Let's go ahead.
Council hadn't read the entire application and all the answers to the application, but was not concerned about the lack of specificity as to the town's ability to sell the parcel, since sale would be pursuant to 24 VSA 1061. And that statute, as you know, requires notice to the community, who can then petition for a vote, or the town, us, can, the select board can elect to schedule a vote at either an annual or a special town meeting. Council did caution, however, that should the grant be awarded and the project proceed, the town's legal costs could be in the range of $10,000. And there's always the possibility of unanticipated additional costs in the event environmental or other problems are discovered on the property. So I wanted the board to be aware of that. On question 5 of the application, which is page 12, it asks for the level of municipal government support. And the answer is in-kind services from the town manager, who would act as the contact person, and 150 hours from volunteer time from the committee. And then that there could be other ways for the town to contribute, including making available the town's $45,000 affordable housing reserve fund. On page 5, it talks about the total contribution of the town being $6,000, but the total project requiring $60,000 in addition. And then on page 11, it states that Two Rivers will provide overall program administration for the planning grant, including procurement for services over $10,000, financial management and reporting. So unraveling these, the first concern I have is we have unappointed people on the Affordable Housing Subcommittee. A subcommittee of the Planning Commission, which is approved, the Planning Commission is approved to be 7 members. So I think the board has to figure out, do we want to expand the Planning Commission to 12 members and appoint all the people who are on this Affordable Housing Subcommittee? Because I do think it's problematic that there's 2 people listed on the grant, yourself, Jeff, and Brian Loeb, who don't have current appointments on the Planning Commission. So that's problematic to me. Preparers on, I went through that. The in-kind contribution, at this point, the only person on the committee who's appointed would be Jeff Goodrich, and that would be 150 hours of his time. And the town manager, in speaking with Brennan, and I don't want to speak for Brennan, but I'll just relay our conversation. It's my understanding that he doesn't really have time to be the contact person for the grant or to otherwise provide the required program administration. So since, we haven't anticipated that demand on his time, and there's a lot of other essential stuff going on in the town manager's office at the moment, as well as the stuff that pops up like Hemlock Road, while Brennan could and should sign as the senior administrative officer of the town, I would suggest that the TRORC, who's proposed for the grant administrator, should be the contact person, with Brennan receiving notifications so that the board gets, is involved in that. So I'm wondering, and before you answer this, I'm going to finish my last point. Is there written evidence of TRORC's willingness to provide grant program administration? And can we ask if they would be willing to be contract entity as well? And then finally, Fund 23 is available according to the document that I can't think of the name of it, the glossary, the fund glossary. It's actually a revolving type of fund which anticipates payback. But if this grant is going to be for $60,000, there's a couple of things. It's my understanding, but I might be wrong, that if you're contracting with people to do the work, in the first instance, the town would have to be paying for stuff. And then we get refunded from the grant. But it looks like there might be a difference of $15,000 potentially. And so I'd just like to have the board consider where we would draw those monies after we exhausted 53 or 43 or whatever it's called.
45, yeah.
So those are my concerns, and I kind of throw it out first to the board. Also, the question about TRORC is for you. Do you know, do we have anything in writing from them about their willingness to participate?
I'm happy to answer, to address any and all of your questions, subject to your determination. But the quick answer is that we have oral promise, but we're happy to get something in writing, and we're happy to ask them if they would serve as the contact person.
Okay.
I'd be happy to address any of your other concerns as well.
Okay.
If I could.
The board members, I threw all that out. Does anybody have any comments, thoughts?
I have a
Roger.
question. So I think Mary was first, though. I don't know if Mary. Did you have your hand up, Mary?
Yeah, I would just looking through the motion sheet. There's a lot of information, Marcia, that you threw out.
Yeah.
So on item number 6, on 6C, could you clarify? It says the town quote unquote contribution will not be quote unquote in kind, but will be paid from blank. What does that mean?
Well, if you look at the grant, part of the in-kind contribution was to be $6,000, I believe, from Brennan's work, or X number of hours. Go ahead, tell me.
Could I clarify? So we had left this part to be worked out once we got the direction from the board. But first of all, we can charge for volunteer time whether they are an official member of a committee or not. So that is not a barrier, so it's not limited to Jeff Goodrich. It's not limited to people on the Affordable Housing Subcommittee. If we can show that there are people volunteering on a project, then we can bill for their time. So I would not worry about Jeff Goodrich having to do 150 hours. What we were proposing is that we would use up to 100, we would use 150 hours of volunteer time, and then some amount of time from the future planning director, plus a little bit of Brennan's time just to oversee it, because he said that he would want to have some level of involvement, not at the $6,000 level, but some level of involvement. And that I was going to speak with Brennan just about clarifying how much of his time versus how much of a planning director's time versus the volunteers, and that we would work that out. If that, we were trying to make it easy for you not to have to spend $6,000. If you would rather, allocate the $6,000 from there's plenty of funding sources available, that would be an alternative, and that's perfectly acceptable from our perspective. Just to be really clear, though, about the $45,000, we are not proposing that the $45,000 revolving fund be involved at this stage of the project. This is a planning grant. We're going to get a check we're going to get, I believe we're going to get a grant from the state. Brennan can explain. Brennan, do we get the money? Like, if they approve the grant, do they just write us a check? Or do we have to spend the money first and seek reimbursement?
It's almost always reimbursement. I actually had a call in just thinking of this today to VCDP just to get confirmation. But normally all their grants are reimbursement. So you actually have to have funding, pay for whatever the service might be, and then you submit for a reimbursement of that. And that's what the grant covers. So you do have kind of some money moving in and out of a municipality. It's not just a blank check, spend it, and when you're done, tell us about it.
Okay, so that, yeah, you would need to decide where you want that money to come from. But ultimately, it would be reimbursed by the state, so it would not be a permanent expenditure.
Right, but we'd still be, there'd be a gap if we were using that particular fund.
Correct.
We haven't budgeted anything else. So that's what I wanted the board to think about.
But
Roger?
Mary, do you want to finish? Sorry.
Yes,
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. Just a follow-up. So I'm still a little bit unclear. I figured it was a $60,000 grant. We have to, I think, have a 10% match, and that's where the $6,000 comes from.
yeah, correct.
Okay, but it seems as though, well, one of the things is it seems as though we might need to have more than that to adequately, support this grant. And also, are there any parameters for how the $6,000 is spent within the grant structure?
Yeah, so I do not anticipate needing more than $6,000. I anticipate that the $6,000, it would be adequate.
But
Plus the state's $60,000 contribution.
I'm hearing
think
from Marcia the $10,000 in legal costs, and that sounds, I don't know where that comes from, but that's more than six right there. So
let me clarify. That was what he said in terms of if this goes from soup to nuts, we start out and there has to be a transfer of the property and all of that kind of stuff, right up to like it's approved.
okay, so Marcia, you're talking about if the planning grant shows that this is a viable site, the $10,000 would be one of the initial costs for actually making it happen. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, I think he meant right up to the point where we've transferred the property to somebody. So it's $10,000 from initiation to right through the project, and now we're done with it.
Right, but I think that's not the initial, it's not an initial planning grant cost.
No,
Right? It would be one of the next steps of trying to actually act upon it. Is that
right.
true? Okay, I just wanted clarity on that.
So my understanding from your budget is it's $66,000, 6,000 being
6,000.
intended to be in kind, not really including any of the legal fees.
Well, that actually was one of the questions that I had for Brennan. It seems to me that if we do anticipate a small amount of legal fees to answer questions during the planning phase, we could count that towards the 6,000 as well. So what my plan had been, we could do it now, or I could work it out with Brendan, is once you give us direction of general parameters, we would work out exactly, how much of that is legal fees versus how much of that is volunteer time, how much of that is time from Brendan, how much of that is time from planning director. You get to $6,000 pretty quickly using those.
Legal.
Yeah.
So may
Sure.
So I feel like we're talking about like the drapery on one figure in the Sistine Chapel, and I'm not sure. I think there's some larger questions, right? So I have one concern and then one question. The concern is, for years at this point, whenever my community or our community asks for a major planning project, I have told them, and I still believe this to be true, that they need to wait till the town of Norwich has a planner or a planning director. That still, sadly, after years, is still not the case, right? So we're talking about Jeff Goodrich, we're talking about volunteers, we're talking about whether the town manager has enough time. So it's sort of obfuscating the fact that we don't actually have the personnel and the available resources to lead this project. So my opinion is we don't actually have a staffer who in the town of Norwich who would be fully entrusted with this project. That should be a concern, because there's also a grant with like reporting requirements. And then my second question is, what are the legal, environmental, or moral obligations and costs associated with that when we do some kind of test and discover something that we might not want to have discovered? There's a lot of unknowns about this particular site potentially. And then do we incur costs? Because we may or may not have a viable housing site, but we may or may not have something else that needs to be cleaned up. So my question is, what are these? I'm sure that this has been anticipated by people who have worked on this project. And so what have these conversations look like? What can you tell us about that?
Sure. Well, first of all, on your first point, I do want to note that the TRORC, which our professional staff have agreed to conduct all of the necessary grant administration work. So we do have a professional staff that will be paid out of the grant proceeds to cover that particular cost.
Meaning TRORC.
TRORC, correct.
But we need that in writing.
Yes, we can get that in writing. In terms of your broader question about, we have indeed anticipated this. And so there is a program in Vermont called the BRELA program that is intended to provide a shield from future liability. And the way it would work is that in order to apply for the BRELA program, you cannot be the entity that caused the damage, right? And so the way it has worked with other municipalities that have owned land that wanted to proceed with programs is that first you go through the planning phase to figure out, do you have a viable project? Does it make any sense to go forward? If there's no viable project, you don't move forward. If there is a viable project, if the planning grant says, yes, there's a viable project, the next step would be to do an environmental assessment, phase 1 assessment, which is a kind of a paper assessment, then a phase 2, which is a assessment that involves actually digging. The recommendation is to, before you move forward with the phase 2 assessment, to actually bring in a prospective purchaser of that property, who would be the one who would apply to be in the BRELA program. And so they would basically apply to be in the BRELA program. They would have access to funds for the environmental assessments. Once the assessment either would say it's clean, in which case, great, you get a clean bill of health. If there's a problem, they would have access to funding to clean up the site. And they would, at that point, they would get a clean bill of health. And so you would basically enter the BRELA program via a prospective purchaser. The Green Mountain Economic Development Corporation has done this for another town. They can come back and talk to you about how that works. Another possibility would be to go with a group like Habitat for Humanity, which is a group that does housing development and has expressed interest in the site. And potentially they're the ones who are the prospective purchaser. I mean, you could do it in a number of different ways, but if you went with the Green Mountain Economic Development Corporation, they would not keep the property. They would want to basically clear it of title and clear it and give it back to you so that you would have an unencumbered parcel. But that's the way that I've been advised is the safest way to shield the town from liability in the event that there's a problem.
Council did say there's always the possibility of an unanticipated additional cost because of this. And just devil's advocate, you can sort of imagine that at any phase before phase 2, something could be discovered for which, we wouldn't have this strongman protection.
Yeah, we would not be doing an environmental assessment before then. So that's unlikely, but it's conceivable like any time. Right. Yeah.
So it's a risk.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have a question?
Yeah. Can I have a follow-up if I may?
Yeah, sure.
And there's no existing mapping or written records that would tell us more about this particular parcel or the site.
There's none that we're aware of. When you do an environmental assessment, the first phase is a phase 1 assessment, and they have access to better historical records than we do. So they would be, before you would be, you would do any kind of digging, they would look at these historical records. So the only historical record that's available is there is a record of a half-acre dump site, which is a very small part of the parcel. It's a 22+ acre parcel. And we all know that the historical dump site is south of the transfer station. So That's the only record that we have available at this point. But it's possible that during the phase one assessment, we would learn more. And certainly if we learned that there's some big problem, that would be an issue. I mean, you could go to the site, walk around. There are mature trees there. It's, I think, unlikely that there's been any digging on that site, but that's what the environmental assessment would help you figure out.
Okay, and that is or isn't part of this planning grant.
It is not. So what we've been told by TRORC is that they would not authorize funds for an environmental assessment until they know there's a possibility of a viable project. So the sequence is figure out if there's a viable project. If there's a viable project, then move forward with the environmental assessment. If phase one suggests that you're going to do a phase two, which it almost certainly would, bring in a prospective purchaser so you qualify for the BRELA program, shield the town from liability, access funding, kind of move forward from there.
Okay.
So we're kind of several steps away from that.
Okay, thank you, Priscilla.
So this may be just too far out there to worry about, but suppose things are looking good. You get a prospective buyer who enters the BRELA program and they find there is something that needs cleaning up. It can take so long to clean something up. Would that stop the project?
I think the answer is no. I think there's certainly a time lag associated with all of this, right? There's a time lag associated with the planning process, with the environmental assessment, with the cleanup. So I think what we have to do is think long-term, right? You know, if it can take several years before a project is able to get going. And that's just, unfortunately, that's something we've learned to live with in the affordable housing world. I mean, in California, it could be 7 years from the time a project is proposed to the time it's completed. So yeah, the main effect of the time is that costs go up, right? Because, you know, to the extent that there's inflation and costs go up. Yeah. So on the other hand, you know, they're getting the site for potentially at low or no cost, and that could be really helpful.
Do any other board members have a comment, or Brennan, do you want to say something before I go to Jan?
No, I don't think I have anything really to add. Certainly, you know, as Jeff mentioned and others have, if we were staffed, you know, fully in our planning office with a, you know, knowledgeable, experienced planning director, this would really fall into their wheelhouse. And I think I'd be a little more comfortable, you know, saying, hey, this is worth pursuing right now. You know, we hope that we will by the time this whole process ends. You know, we're going to be 8-10 months from where we are today, and it's certainly possible there will be, but we don't currently, I guess, and that's these are difficult. You know, it's a difficult site, and then the piece of the grant and the management, you know, the application piece is really the easiest part of the grants usually, and the most fun. And then from there, it's managing these. You know, the state has their own GEARS program, which is kind of the grant management. So somebody normally at the municipality is responsible for kind of going through that, and it's a lot of work. I want everybody to be aware that you know, it's probably a worthy endeavor, but it is definitely going to be a long and difficult process to get through this. And that doesn't even take into account, you know, we're looking to hire specialists. That's going to require creating RFPs and reviewing RFPs and making hiring decisions there. So again, it is a pretty extensive project we're talking about.
And if I could just say, Brennan, my understanding is that TRORC would be responsible for the procurement process under our agreement. So, I mean, again, there is a professional staff that is available to help. They do this for a lot of towns that don't have planning directors, and they're able to move forward. So the other point is that the grant will not be approved at the earliest until June. You know, and you're required to start 3 months later. So that gives us another 6 to 8 months to get a planning director on board, which hopefully we will have.
Pam Smith?
Just one quick question. What is the submission deadline for this project, for this grant application?
The submission deadline is the first week of April. Our hope for timing would be if you guys tell us we need to make a few more changes, but it's in reasonable shape, would be to try to hold the public hearing in early February and come back to you for a vote in late February.
Okay, Jan? Jan Lansfield?
Thank you, Marcia. I had a couple of things to say relative to the issue of subcommittee appointed members and official members, that it actually relates to the agenda topic on the handbook as well. So I don't know if you want to, you brought it up here. I can talk to it here, or we can talk to it under your handbook conversation.
Well, why don't you address your comments that would pertain to this topic here? And then potentially you may have more to say globally when we get to the handbook.
Yeah. So I think our feeling about the subcommittees we've had these conversations at the Planning Commission relative to membership in subcommittees and how formal that membership needs to be. And the way we are going forward is to say that the subcommittees are non-voting bodies that recommend or propose to the full Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission is the deciding body that then either votes or submits things to the Select Board. So given that sort of limitation on the power or the importance of formal membership in a subcommittee, we are less concerned about who's an official member and who's not. And so, for example, when Jeff says there's going to be a public hearing for this proposal, that will be a jointly warned meeting. It will be a warned meeting of the Planning Commission and of the Affordable Housing Subcommittee. And then it will be the Planning Commission that submits the proposal to the Select Board. So the Planning Commission is the source of decision making, and therefore the formal subcommittee membership is less important. And I certainly would not advocate for expanding the size of the Planning Commission to 12 for the sake of chasing these members that are on the Affordable Housing Subcommittee right now, but that's a separate topic.
Well, we can talk about this more under the subcommittee handbook topic, but you always have to think of the worst case scenario, and let's just decide that a group decides that they want to put a chicken coop on top of Tracy Hall, and they found a grant to do that, and they find a committee appointed by the Select Board, and they convince that committee that this is a good idea, and we now have grant proposals presented to us by a group that was never appointed by the Select Board. I think every definition of subcommittee that you look at in any dictionary will tell you it's a subcommittee. A subcommittee is a smaller group appointed from a larger committee or parent group. So I think we'll leave that for the board to hash through, but that's my concern about the crazy things that can happen and how we govern this town in a logical fashion so that we, the governing body, knows what's happened. So
my only comment to that is that the proposal is that this application is coming to you from the Planning Commission officially, and that's an appointed body of the Select Board.
Got it. Roger.
I mean, it's like one of the consultants is also a member of the Planning Commission, so we should probably work out that potential conflict if this goes forward. The other, but my actual question was, okay, so the February hearing, the public hearing is the required part of this application. Is that right, Jeff?
A public hearing is required, has to be noticed 15 days before, yeah.
Okay. So I guess my question is like, obviously you do a lot of advocacy in this space. And so I'm just like really interested in what do you say to sort of policymakers on any level who, I mean, I think we need to have some kind of affordable housing project. And I think the planning grant is a good opportunity for having a conversation and allowing people to have some kind of imagination for a potential project, like just to learn about the process of how these projects come together. However, it's a very, very real, deeply felt concern, at least on my part, and I hope other board members' parts, that the capacity of town administration is emergent, is
Adequate.
it's adequate, but I don't. I'm concerned from a human resource management perspective. I'm very concerned about, putting this in the hands of third-party consultants and not having the capacity in-house to manage it. So I guess what would you, but though I feel like it's deeply felt, I imagine advocates here that is a very convenient excuse to sort of not make progress on an important issue. So what is your, I guess, advice or reaction in hearing that?
Are you asking me, Roger?
Go ahead, Nat.
Yes, I am.
Okay, yeah. Well, here's my reaction. First of all, we have TRORC. We're paying them an administrative fee to handle the administration of the grant. I think that's really important. Second, I am a professional consultant for a living. I manage large contracts, multi-million-dollar contracts. Brian has significant experience. Jeff Goodrich has significant experience. Jan has significant experience. There are a lot of us involved who will be exercising oversight over the people that are hired to do this work. So I don't think it's fair to say that they will go unsupervised. There are a lot of towns that don't have planning directors. There are a lot of towns that nevertheless work with TRORC to get planning grants to move forward with projects. We are, if anything, in a better position than they are. We have more qualified staff here. We have larger staffs. We have very qualified volunteers. I don't know what to say. I mean, I do this for a living. I work in this kind of space. I'm happy to put myself on the line to make sure that we get good quality work, that people don't have a conflict. So I think this is a very manageable project, given that we have TRORC and we have really highly qualified volunteers who are available to manage it. It's not like we're saying we're going to move forward with a $3 million project. It's a $60,000 project. It's going to be over in a few months. I think it's a relatively modest thing, and I would hate to say we'll never move forward with these things because we can't get our act together to hire a planning director. That just seems like
sorry.
Go ahead, Roger.
I appreciate that, but the last time that we didn't have all our ducks in a row and say like a very potential viable zoning decision for Route 5 South, nobody ever talked about it again, right? So are we in a situation where if we're not adequately set up for success, are we going to never talk about it again? Like, I really just want to make sure that we're coming from a position of strength and that we have sort of our town administration truly on board. Otherwise, people will get skittish and just move on to something else. And I don't think there's so much left to do to get this goal, right? So yes, I hear you, but I think we gotta keep it a little more real. I don't know how many small towns governed by TRRC take on these kinds of projects, actually.
So can I just suggest, I'm hearing some reticence on the part of Mary and definitely Roger, and I have definite concerns about our staffing, and I know that hopefully we're close to hiring, or I'm hoping we're close to hiring someone. At this point, we could potentially table this. We could ask for a letter from TRORC explaining exactly what they'll do for us and how much that'll cost. And then revisit this again. And maybe by that time we'll have a new hire. I don't know. How does the board feel about that? I mean, I understand Jeff wants to get going with this, but it's, anything that you rush is potentially problematic. And I think there are some things that we still have concerns about. So since April is the deadline, meanwhile, I know that you're not anxious to put anything on the ballot, but it might be a wise thing to just prepare for that so that you can put something reasonable that people can expect and we can vote for it. And then if all the ducks come into alignment so that we have a planning commissioner, not planning commissioner, director, and whatever else we want, we know what fund it's going to come out of, we're ready to go. But we have some time. Board members, what do you think?
I'm still a little hung up on the cash flow issue because we'd have to come up with $60,000 before it was reimbursed.
Well, we could use the revolving affordable housing fund.
It doesn't have that much. It doesn't have 60,000 in it.
Right. Roger? I can't hear you.
So I think part of it is sort of Mary started the discussion with sort of the motion that had many sort of caveats and conditions, right? So if we were to have I guess my question would be what would a clear motion be for this project? I heard Priscilla sort of kind of formulating that too. So regardless of whether or not board members are looking to take action, I mean, I do have reticence, like what would the actual simple motion look like, right? Because yeah, Mary was right. It was a lot of, it was a lot.
It was intended to break down the concerns so that, you could pick and choose and figure out where things are going to be paid from. But we don't have anything in writing from TRORC, so I think we can't say that the project manager will be TRORC. We also, we know Brennan doesn't have time to do this. So, I mean, I would suggest that we just table it again. I know you're not going to be happy with that, but I think we need to do some.
Looks like Mary has her hand up.
Oh, sorry, I can't see it. Mary?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't put up the little mechanical hand. Yeah, I think I need a little more clarity on time and money. Who's going to do what and where the money's going to come from. Just a little bit more specificity. How many hours TRORC will, do they have a limit? Or is it a typical project that would have a certain number of hours? So I would like to have a little more clarity on that. But I do support it. I support moving forward, but I feel it's a little too fuzzy of a budget to feel really confident about signing off on it. I think the beginning of the motion where it says, I move to authorize the town manager to sign the VCDP grant application as the town's chief administrative officer, we would be signing off on basically a draft that I think needs a little bit more tweaking. Right. So I don't want it to get lost, but I do want it to be developed a little further.
And can I just say really clearly that I don't think a motion from the board at this point to approve the grant would be acceptable because we haven't held the public hearing yet. So I do think that before you issue your final approval of it, we have to hold the public hearing. So I think you can make whatever motion you want, but we will need to come back to you after the public hearing, right? And so my plan was to take your input now, to work with Brennan to finalize the budget. I agree that the budget needs to be finalized. I've heard that you want more detail in writing from TRORC about what they're committing to, and I can get that. And that we would then hold the public hearing, get their input, reflect that back, go back to the Planning Commission, who is the designated body. They would then, if they approve it, they would bring it back to you for a vote at a later date. That would be my suggestion, but I don't want to move forward with a public hearing if there's not a strong sense that if we address these issues, that we'll be able to move forward. I mean, I can't tell you where that money should come from. I can tell you you'll get reimbursed. So it's not a, it's only a cash flow issue, not a permanent, out of pocket issue.
Yeah, it's our cash flow.
No, I hear you. I hear you.
Mary?
I think I'm getting a little more clarity about what Jeff is asking. And I think we can probably get around the cash flow issue. I still support this project, but I do want that application to be well organized and detailed as to who's going to do what time, what money, who's responsible. And I agree with Roger about not burdening our town manager with much besides just, very 30,000 feet oversight, not being in the weeds with it.
Would you all be comfortable assigning hours to a planning director, even though we don't have one, but assuming we will have one by June? And if that doesn't work out, maybe we could subcontract that role out so that you would have somebody who has the skill set that you could empower to act, on a part-time basis. It just seems.
Roger?
I mean, I think what it is that my assessment as one board member, I think it's more powerful if the board agrees with the assessment as an entity. But my assessment is like we could find a planner or a planning director, and they may or may not have the skills or capacity to take on a project like this. Our last time we made a hire, we hired at a lower level to reflect the fact that their skill set was emerging and that they would learn in the role over time and eventually go from a coordinator to director. That's how I understood that hire to be made. So I think this sort of statement of, when we have the staff, we could do it. I mean, I think the board needs to hear from its town manager and its staff and says, look, we have the capacity, we have the values supported from the town to get a project like this is done. And I am not hearing that from our staff. I'm hearing a very strong Norwich community, as I always do, want something done. And I think the board is saying, from our experience and our interaction with our professionals, we're not sure if it is possible. And so it's just, to me, I'll support the project. I'll make a motion to support you move forward with a listening session or a public hearing. But it is ultimately a huge red flag that I'm not hearing from our staff, a complete endorsement forward. We have to listen to our staff, right? Isn't that where we are at this point? So, and also, I don't think the planning commission comes from a position of strength to be able to work with the planner. That should be obvious. So, if you attended or heard anything about their meeting, there we are. Okay. I'm speaking as truthfully and openly as I can.
Thank you, Roger. Would the board be amenable to seeing some more information from Jeff next week, particularly from TRORC? And Brennan, do you have time to talk to, I don't mean next week, I mean the next time we meet, which is the 24th. Brennan, do you have time to work with Jeff about a budget? And I guess what we're talking about is just having a little bit more idea of the concrete nature of things, and also maybe a better idea about where we would pay for stuff from, because even if it is only $15,000, it is $15,000. And then next week, we might feel a little more confident as a group saying, go ahead and pull together a public meeting, because I'm not sure exactly what you'd be telling people at this point. You couldn't tell them exactly how you're going to do this, right? So how does the board feel about that? And how does Brennan feel about that? Let's hear from Brennan first.
So I think in the next 2 weeks, if we're talking about the 24th, I will have some capacity to meet with Jeff or talk with maybe it makes sense for both of us to talk with Two Rivers. And, you know, as I said, I have a call in right now to the VCDP rep just to confirm the reimbursement piece. The other thing I guess I was going to mention related to the reimbursement is that this probably is not all going to come in as one invoice for $60,000. So this will probably be spread out with some capacity to have things reimbursed on a moving scale. So I'm not terribly concerned that we're going to exceed, again, at $45,000 was kind of where we're pulling this funding from to be reimbursed back in. I don't know that we're going to expend all of that, you know, at any one time. Again, I support the project too. Like I think affordable housing is a worthy endeavor in Norwich. I've had concerns about the capacity of the site that we're talking about and the many difficult nuances of developing housing there. I wish we had, you know, a more attractive site that I could get a little more excited about up front. And I've told Jeff that several times. He's aware of my concern there. And again, it is in my mind, it is a capacity concern that I've seen how much time these can take, and I know I don't have that, and Miranda doesn't have that in the town manager's office currently. So that's kind of where we are. I don't know that that's going to change in a week either. So that's I guess my opinion.
But at least we could come back in 2 weeks and have some more clarity.
We could certainly refine the budget and get some more definition of who would do what in a proposed project. Yes.
Okay. So is the board comfortable with that procedure?
I am.
Thank you. Roger?
Yes, I think it's subject to, I don't know if we're hearing an update on the hire, a potential hire, but, you know, if you were to hire a planner, if a planner becomes a consultant, like if we don't hire an A-line staffer, but if we hire a consultant with the planning skills, then and write a project like this into their contract, I might be more open. So like, yes, I'm open to it, but like Brennan said, like something very material, something new will have to appear, not just a tinkering of the current material. Something new would have to change for me. Do you know what I mean?
Okay. Pam?
I'm very comfortable with what's being said.
Okay. Priscilla?
I think in general, we are all very supportive of and understand the need for affordable housing in this town, and also appreciate that it's extremely complicated and surprisingly expensive to do. And you know, God is in the details, and we're not quite comfortable enough yet, I think, with the details. So, if you were saying, do you want us to say, yeah, we're in favor of the idea of doing this, go have your hearing, because until the hearing, we can't really authorize anything anyway, then yeah.
Well, at this moment, we're talking about just having Brennan and Jeff work with TRORC and come back and talk to us in 2 weeks.
I like that idea.
Okay. So that's where we are. Jan, did you have anything more to add? Where's your hand just up?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just left my hand up. I'm sorry. No, I think we just have to get the timing of the public hearing. If it's 15 days to notice, and then we don't start that clock until 2 weeks from now, then we just have to back that up and make sure it'll fit for the April deadline.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jeff, and for your tenacity.
Yeah, no, yeah. So I will get with Brennan. We'll come back with a plan for the administration of this. And we could hopefully at the next meeting, if you're then comfortable, authorize the public hearing so we can get that process moving. That would be great.
Okay. You'll be on the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that means us, if I can find my script here, we are at the Selectboard Handbook discussion. So let's see, now that we're past the budget season, I intended to include an updated version of the Selectboard Handbook in it reflects the added material. To remind everybody, the idea is to have an organic repository of current information which we can keep updated and which appointed and elected officials and anyone else in town can consult when they're looking for information, opportunities to serve, process expectations, etc. Hopefully, this will allow for increased productivity, improved communication, and coordinated work across the town. When it looks complete, we can look at it with a view to amendments and ratification, and then publish it on the website for reference. That's my hope. For purposes of tonight, I wanted to do a couple of things in particular. As to the open meeting law, I put in some language on page 4 of the handbook, which serves as a preliminary notice to our appointed committees and other groups, as well as elected officials, that we're committed to continuing to follow the law, and that where the law is less than clear or has gaps, we will interpret it as agreed, and town council will be providing us with more language. So in other words, that the language that's in there right now is a hold. In the interim, any groups with questions, I would say should be referred to the town manager so that he can flesh those out with council. And in the event that you thought it was necessary, I did put in a motion potentially so that we could adopt that language, but it would be obviously subject to further guidance from council, so you may not feel it's necessary. As to subcommittee appointments, I already sort of went over that briefly with the conversation with Dawn in the last topic, but I included language on page 4 as well to affirm that a subcommittee is comprised of members of a parent committee or group, all of whom are appointed by the select board and all of whom will have unexpired terms. That the parent group can't appoint other additional individuals who are not appointed by the select board to serve on subcommittees, and the parent groups will oversee the work of subcommittees to ensure compliance with law and town policy. If the board agrees with those basic tenets and principles, then we could do the same. We could have a motion or whatever. But I do think that there is a real concern that we can't dismiss, that if the people could come to the board with various proposals, and they might not be from channels that we expect. And so it takes up time and it is disappointing for folks. And I think what we've got here is a governance situation that we've set up that's consistent with other communities and is supposed to mean that we have a fully functioning, comprehensive government that isn't confusing to people. So that's my take on subcommittees. And I would note that I think the Trails Committee may be a similar situation. And if you all have read the newspaper, I think it was Woodstock had a problem with a Trails Committee doing some work, which actually was detrimental and had to be repaired. And they weren't all appointed people. So I'm just throwing it out that this is something I think we should discuss. Does anyone want to join in?
Yeah.
Priscilla.
I think I agree with the idea that subcommittees and all that should be from people that have been appointed by the select board to the committees, but we're already seeing apparently an issue where this isn't going to work because the Affordable Housing Subcommittee has people on it who are not technically part of the Planning Commission.
Oh,
So, yeah.
Isn't that the dog, the tail wagging the dog? I mean,
well, no, but it's interesting because so I think in principle, this is what we should do. So maybe I'm going at it backwards, but does that mean we say, well, gee, some of you who aren't actually on the Planning Commission should not be on affordable housing? Because it sounds though they're the two biggest forces on it.
well, if there's other options, we could expand the size of the Planning Commission. We are unfortunately going to have applications for the Planning Commission anyway, because we have a sad opening. We also have to have, Jack Candon had a position that needs to be replaced. So we are going to be addressing things. Miranda maybe knows of other positions that are open that we need to address. So, you know, I can remember a couple of spirited discussions that this board has had in the past, long before I was on it, about sizes of committees, planning commission in particular. But, you know, if we are not able to accommodate, then, you know, maybe we do. If we can't get the work done that is needing to be done and the sizes of the committees aren't sufficient, then maybe we do have to consider making them larger. Mary?
I actually am interested in Jan's reasoning, which if I understand correctly, you would not require a subcommittee to necessarily be members of a committee or commission, although you might want to require a liaison. I think that might be wise. Because I think we're talking about an issue of both coherence and control. But I think the subcommittees often are doing research. You know, they're sort of getting a little bit more in the weeds than I think you'd want your planning commission or any other more major committee to be in. And then they bring their findings back. And I think the filter and the means of control and coherence is that the subcommittee would go back to the appointed committee, and the appointed people would vet out what was done by the subcommittee before it goes any further. So I think I might push back a little on the idea that the select board has to appoint members to a subcommittee, but it might require a liaison from whatever appointed committee or commission it was.
And so, Mary, how would you propose we handle, you know, compliance issues like open meeting law? Because if you've got people who are appointed by folks who may not themselves understand exactly, we're farther away from the people who are doing some work, who are still going to be responsible for following the open meeting law and doing minutes and all of that. And yet we may not really have, you know, good control or know what they're doing.
Well, could I respond to that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a huge education piece, and especially in light of our settlement agreement, because the requirements, I think, have become more granular and more particular than we understood them to be in the past. And everyone in this town that's involved with any kind of governing, you know, if they're going to adhere to the open meeting law, they're going to have to thoroughly understand that. And I don't think that the select board appointing people to a subcommittee is going to solve that problem.
Well, to be clear, I wasn't suggesting that the select board appoint subcommittee members, but that the select board appoints the same committees that it's decided to appoint, and the committees themselves decide if they need a subcommittee and make their appointments. But they're appointing people who have existing terms. I mean, this application grant is a good example. It represents, you know, these two people who no longer have existing appointments. And so I don't know, I'd be interested in what council would say about that. Jan, let me hear from all of the board members first. So Roger, you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, I think ultimately council would only tell you what is and isn't a public body, right? So which both are. I don't really see the efficacy for a subcommittee. You know, their agendas are not set by the planning commission. The planning commission isn't charging them with looking at anything in particular. The subcommittee reports back to the planning commission, but like the enhanced energy and energy historic preservation, those are not subcommittees, and they're not any more or less planning issues than affordable housing. Give it terms and make it its own committee. The only committees that we should have in the town of Norwich are standing committees and ad hoc temporary committees. Ad hoc temporary committees explore a particular question for a period of time, and standing committees are exactly the opposite, right? There's a long-term set of issues that need to be addressed. Quite frankly, affordable housing mercifully should be, I would hope, an ad hoc committee, but it is not, because we have not raised a standing issue. So thus it is a long-term committee. So same trails, like why would trails like be a subcommittee of conservation? And I think it's particularly confusing with trails because there's trails committee members and then there's trails committee volunteers, and the trails committee members do the OML, but the trails committee volunteers are not part of the committee, right? So
You lost me. I'm not sure if you're saying everybody should be appointed or it doesn't matter if they're appointed.
I'm saying the select board makes all committee appointments and there are no subcommittees of any other body. They're all just either standing or they're ad hoc, and they're appointed by the select board.
So in other words,
no efficacy for the affordable housing subcommittee to be a subcommittee. They don't function as a subcommittee.
okay, so under the facts as they stand at the moment, we've got 12 people who are functioning as, and I haven't looked at the others, but affordable housing and planning commission. So the five, I've got to find my list. Yes, the 5 people who don't have appointments, who list themselves as affordable housing, are you saying that they should or should not be on that committee?
I'm saying that they are committee members. I think it should be made clear. First of all, they should have a charter. I don't know if they do, or they should have a scope of work, ideally written, if they're a committee, ideally written by the board, and then you just give them terms and they apply every 3 years or whatever it is. It could be 5, it could be 7, it could be 9, but the charter would determine it.
And who do they apply to?
Who does what apply to?
You said they apply.
They apply to the board. Like there's an application process to serve on that committee, just like every other committee.
To the select board?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Mary's saying they should be appointed by the select board. You're saying they should not be, don't need to be. You're saying they should be appointed by the select board.
Yeah, because I see no efficacy of subcommittees in the town of Norwich. The only time, yeah.
Okay, and I'm saying that they should be appointed by the select board, whether you call them ad hoc or whatever. And Priscilla.
It's a different function.
Priscilla's getting confused. Priscilla's confused. So let me try and explain it again. So what's happened with the planning commission is the board decided there'd be 7 members of the planning commission. I don't know how this happened, if the planning commission actually appointed them or they self-selected, but there are now 5 members of something called an affordable housing subcommittee of the planning commission. 5 of those members on the affordable housing committee, 5 of 6, were not appointed by the select board and or do not have a current term. So for example, Jeff Lubell was once on the planning commission, but his term expired. I don't know about the others. So the question is, do you think that all people who serve in some capacity on a board, commission, whatever you want to call it, are appointed by the select board? And then or committees that are appointed by the select board can just pull in other people and call them members of subgroups?
How about the planning commission seems to me has tremendous, huge charge. Maybe, 7 members of the planning commission, and there are people who want to work on a particular thing, like say affordable housing. Perhaps they should come to us and say, will you appoint these people to the affordable housing committee? They're
So that's what Roger's saying.
Yeah, they're not necessarily I mean, I still would prefer to have affordable housing come to us through the planning commission.
Right.
But if the planning commission says, we would like you to appoint these people to affordable housing.
Okay.
And they aren't necessarily part of the planning commission itself. They're on a separate piece of it, but they're still appointed to that piece.
Okay. So right now we've got select board appointment is Roger, Marcia, and Priscilla. And Pam, where did you go? What's your feeling? Pam?
Sorry, I moved to a different room to see if I could fix my audio issues. Is it better?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm actually in the room that has the main network connection, so maybe that will fix it. I kind of think that maybe we should be making the Affordable Housing Subcommittee a real committee and the Trails Committee a real committee, and that we ask people to apply and we appoint them. And that will solve all of these issues. I'm more concerned about the open meeting law comment that you have in the handbook about how and who is going to monitor the activities to make sure that we're in compliance.
Yep. And let's hold that as a separate issue. Right. Right now we're talking about this one. We can go back to the other one. So informally, without a vote, we've got 4 people believe there should be select board appointments for anybody who's serving on something. Mary, you want to add a comment?
No, I think that just in the course of this conversation, what Roger says makes a lot of sense. And I'm also thinking about my experience with the Child Care Committee, which I believe also came out of a concern that was put forth in the town plan. So it started in the planning commission, and it was seen as a need, and it was an ad hoc committee. So it had a sunset date, and it also had a charge, and everyone was appointed by the select board. And I felt that that worked really well. Yeah. So I think, well, why not just have the same kind of process for the, the affordable housing, what's now known as Affordable Housing Subcommittee, just kind of apply that process to it. And trails, there is, I think, a connection to the Conservation Commission in that the construction of trails has to be done in a very certain way, so as not to affect wildlife or not to affect the Appalachian Trail corridor and things like that. So there is a connection, but that might be expressed through a charter that's informed by the, the Conservation Committee's knowledge of what needs to be done. That makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
So good. I think we're coming out to something here that looks really solid. The next phase of it, I think, would be that we've got to look at all of the committees that we've got and classify them under the sort of Roger rubric. Is this a standing committee? Is this a whatever? Ad hoc,
temporary. Yeah.
Right. And make sure that they've all got charters. So for the moment, I see, the need to appoint these folks to the Affordable Housing Subcommittee. And from what you're saying, this would be, they'd need a charter and they would need terms, but they would not be members of the Planning Commission. However, they would be reporting to the Planning Commission, if I understand what people are saying.
May I also add, I think it is useful if there's a liaison of some sort from either select board or commission, so that, you might get a lot of interested people who've not served on one of these larger committees or commissions, who don't have that sort of larger, broader perspective. I think it's handy to have a liaison either from the commission or the select board. Also, that might be a means of having someone who can educate about the requirements of the open meeting law.
Yep, I think that's a good idea. So, Roger?
So, I mean, I don't necessarily think they don't need to, they don't need to report to the Planning Commission, but Planning Commission members can be members of the Affordable Housing Committee. And in fact, maybe some should be. The only thing I would say about governance is I'm more interested in a structure that has town staff having a role or an obligation to effectively staff these committees. So the Planning Commission should have the planner attend all those meetings, and the planner should, as a staff member, ensure that the meeting minutes and the agenda and the packet is all successfully created. And it is with a relationship with a professional staff member that staff member can in turn bring information back to the town manager, right? So I think, which is not to say that the professional or the paid staff member is acting in place of or of an authority above the commission. It's just that it's an acknowledgement that the town of Norwich is only going to get things done when the staff member can report back to their boss the functioning and decision-making processes of the body that they're appointed to. So you can take staff and you can even write their job descriptions to say, you know, you planner, you will attend these meetings of these commissions and you will play a role in these ways, and you will inform your boss about the activities there in these ways, right? So it creates the sort of one Norwich structure. So rather than figuring out like, you know, select board versus commission, it's more about like making sure that these are staffed so work can get done and open meeting law can be honored and blah, blah, blah. Anyway.
Well, it's certainly good for compliance. I'm just wondering, staff, I mean, we've got a lot of committees and I don't think staff can go to all of them. Yeah. That's the problem. And I also think we need to sort of figure out, some will be standing, some will be ad hoc. Planning Commission is standing, but what the heck is the affordable housing? That's not really ad hoc, as you said, Roger. Not, you know.
I just think it's naive to imagine a committee being able to do anything that then doesn't have the buy-in, support, or oversight or collaboration of a staff member. That's literally what we saw this evening. So if that person is there and working with the commission, it makes a grant application that much easier. They're just not effective. I mean, volunteerism is alive and well, and I love it, but
right. Okay, Mary?
I think in some cases I'd agree with Roger with involving staff, but I also think we have too many committees for that to be practical. And I remember that with the child care committee, you know, I really took over a lot of that liaison as far as the meeting minutes, the posting and all of that, you know, and I don't think you can have a staff member kind of doing that for every single committee that we have. So
yes, but that committee was then chaired by a former Secretary of Education who then became our representative on the merits of that deliverable. So like that's a little different, right? Like it was effectively staffed as far as I'm concerned.
I think Mary has a good point, and maybe what we could do is look at these committees that we've got, classify them, standing, ad hoc, whatever else we want to call them, and then think about what makes sense with the town manager's office for staff. And then it might be that we do something along that model for the child care committee where one of us is actually assigned. Just, you know, to go along, not a voting member, just to go and be the liaison. But I think that's for another day. For the moment, I think what we've decided is that we are going to have everyone appointed. So procedurally, do we want to have all of the folks who are on the Affordable Housing Committee just put in an application, because that's what we do for everybody, and then we appoint them and advertise it at the same time that we do the advertisement for the open position on the planning commission, the open position on the DRB, et cetera. Pam?
Well, we're less than 2 months away from town meeting. And so I would think that since a lot of these positions come up in March anyway, maybe we should look at that as kind of our target date to get things sorted out sometime in March. And
I'm sure we need to get the planning commission seat filled. So I'd rather, and Jan is nodding. So I think, I think Brennan and Miranda should have a conversation about what's available and what we need to advertise right away.
right, there may be some that need to be filled right away, but I'm talking about trying to transition the Trails Committee or the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, trying to transition them to select board appointments. Let's do that maybe in March and deal with the more immediate things now, such as replacing Stewart and replacing Jack Candon.
Considering, I think I have to disagree, because I think that for the Affordable Housing Committee, they're about to potentially go in front of the public for an open meeting under the auspices of being on the Affordable Housing Subcommittee. So I would like to get that sorted so that they appear on their right names. Mary?
I could see that. I do think it's a little bit of cherry picking when we have other, subcommittees, like the energy, isn't the energy committee a subcommittee, for instance? The Trails Committee, there are other committees. So, I mean, you might want to just do them in order, but I wouldn't single out a subcommittee just because, of a circumstance that's happening. It should be, if it's a policy, it should apply to all the subcommittees.
Well, how about we leave it to Brendan and Miranda to come up with the list, and we can and get those advertised and see if we can get this sorted out.
Okay.
All right. Jan, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yes, thank you. I definitely have some thoughts on this. First of all, I would like to point out the importance of what you're talking about, and I would certainly hope that the select board not decide to redo the way committees and subcommittees work in town, and to do that at this meeting without publicizing it more, getting more comment, getting comment from committees and so forth. This is a very serious discussion that it seems to me you're about to make decisions what feels like prematurely. So that's a more kind of specific, general topic. On this topic of subcommittees and other committees, I think you're, with your draft handbook, you're proposing a reset and some thoughtful ways of looking at what do we have in town for governance and making it clear to the people. And I support that completely. It's a reset. So clearly we need to go through the committees we have and look at them. And the Affordable Housing Subcommittee has been around for years and is, it's not grandfathered, but it has historical reasons for who's on it. Clearly, if we want to do a reset of the committee structure, then we would look at those and say, who's on it? I agree very much with getting a process that is consistent across committees. They need charters, they need schedules, timelines of what their charters are. Those are all very important processes to work out and to have consistent. I would just give one example, which is the Solar Siting Subcommittee of the Planning Commission. There are 3 members of the Planning Commission on that. Those are the only members of the subcommittee. It has a very defined written charter, which you can find on the website and on the minutes. And then we have a consistent group of participants who show up at every meeting. They are allowed to speak. They participate, whether they're members or simply informal participants doesn't matter. They're very active, useful members of the conversation. We're talking about getting the public to participate, and requiring everyone who's participating to be appointed by the select board is not a recipe for participation. So I think the solar siting subcommittee works very well, and it brings any official action back to the planning commission. And then the planning commission. So if we're going to we are now working on an enhanced energy plan that would come from subcommittee with its broad participation back to the planning commission and then be submitted to the select board. So I think that you can do this subcommittee with members from the planning commission and then extra participants, because the subcommittees are advisory. And so in closing, I would also point out very strongly that when you look at your committees and commissions, the planning commission is not simply a standing committee of the select board. It has statutory responsibility from independent state law. And so and that's not the same for a trails committee or a affordable housing subcommittee, but your council will tell you the planning commission has independent responsibilities and also independent abilities to have committees to do its work. So I think those things have to be looked at.
Thanks, Jan. That's what we've what I put in my latest handbook draft. There's statutory requirements under every particular committee. I just haven't finished it yet, but I am well aware of statutory requirements for committees who have them and aware of committees who don't have them. In terms of participation, I don't think anybody here tonight has suggested remotely that we don't want people to participate. But when you're listing yourself as a member of a committee that, the select board has never appointed that person, I think that's a different issue. So the select board is going to continue talking about this. Nothing's being decided tonight other than the fact that we have all agreed that we do have to be involved in appointing the people who are on committees, and that we're going to look very carefully about how committees are characterized and that they have charters and we know what they're doing. The whole point of this is to understand what's going on in our town, not only as this governing body, but also for the people in town, so that we're not wasting time, wasting resources, and everybody is working cohesively. And to that end, I would commend you for all of the work that you're doing, because I think you've really dove into the work that needs to be done. And, it looks like you're really doing a good job. We just want to make sure that as this blossoms, we as the governing body of this town know what's happening and we're watching, so that we're not having violations of open meeting law and everybody understands how to comply. So thank you very much. Peter Orner, I've seen your hand for a while.
Thank you, Marcia. I just wanted to echo Jan's point. The tenor of this conversation is absolutely not encouraging participation. I think you can also see how many people are on this call. I think people are very discouraged, and the tone of the discussion very clearly, to me, has a sort of undemocratic undertone. And I, as somebody who's worked for 5 years with a group of residents on a particular issue and felt extremely unheard for those 5 years, I can very much relate to the way that you all treated the public housing folks tonight. Even if you don't agree with what they're doing, or even if you think that there's some problems with what they're doing, I think you could have done a lot more encouraging, like Marcia, you just did, a lot earlier in the evening. And that's just my point. And I appreciate what you all do. I know it's not easy, but I think I think you really should be careful. I know, Marcia, you in particular really encourage participation, but a lot of the comments tonight absolutely went against that. So just want to say that. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. We are encouraging participation. We just want it to be orderly. And this handbook is only an attempt to try and put some order on what's going on in town because so many people just don't know. So that's what's going on. And in terms of your concerns, I think, you know, we still have, I think we need to get our hands around where we have actually been, what resources have actually been put towards this, the report that exists, and where we want to go next. But that may be a conversation that involves the planning commission. It's definitely going to involve the town manager, and it's definitely ultimately going to involve the select board because we're going to have to be thinking about money. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not hearing that we're ready for any sort of motions on these topics tonight. I don't know if we want to return right now to the open meeting law question that Pam had. Essentially, Pam, this draft language that I put in the document is not cut in stone, as I said, because we are expecting to have guidance from our council. And again, this is simply because there are gaps in the law. And when those gaps exist, we need to be concerted about how we act. And that's every committee, every group, every board that we've got in this town. And so this was only the first attempt to say, everybody's got to follow the open meeting law as it exists. There is an agreement to how we handle the gaps where the law is not clear and it is open to interpretation. And that information is going to be coming from town council. So this was just a shot over the bow to let everybody know you're all subject to the open meeting law. And then, you know, to be continued. So I'm not hearing any need at this. Mary, do you want to say something?
Yes, I do think that in the future, if we revisit this topic, that Pam had a very valid question. I mean, and she called it enforcement, but you know, maybe that's not a friendly word, but how do we know that everyone understands and is complying? So I'm not saying we've figured out tonight, but I think that is, I agree with Pam that that's a very important question.
I agree too. And I'm not sure if Brennan has an opinion about this or not, whether we're going to wait for council to include that in their statement or if we want to go through an exercise ourselves. But, Brennan, let me just see what Brennan says, then we'll go back to Pam had a follow-up and then Roger.
Yes, so I think what we've asked of council following the settlement with Mr. Katuki is to define specifically what is going to be considered a public body in the town of Norwich going forward. And then to create and this might be, it's just going to get lifted from the Secretary of State's office, what are the obligations of the open meeting law and convening meetings and minutes and all the pieces that go along with that. And then, you know, my hope would be as we further define who these committees are, that there would be at least one person chairing the committee and that we would at least make sure that they were very aware through reading the directives from council as to what was required. And, you know, will something potentially slip through that is out of compliance? I'm sure it will, but I think that's the best we can possibly do at this point to make it known. Here's what you need to do as part of a public body and a committee, commission, or board in the town of Norwich. And from there, trust that we'll have competent people in those positions that will adhere to that. So I guess that would be my hope, and we don't have that document yet, but I think we will very soon. And we've told them there is some urgency to getting that defined here for the town.
Great, thank you very much. Pam, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I did. Thank you. Yeah, I just was hoping that we would have some more clarity beyond the select board will monitor. I'd like to know who's going to monitor and how it will be monitored. And on the issue of compliance, as I tried to say earlier, and I was having some audio issues, I was thanking Brennan for jumping in and helping the trustees get their meeting properly warned, because Miranda was on vacation for the holidays, and I guess Pam Mullen was. And if I hadn't followed up to see if the agenda had been posted, then we might have met and not had our legally warned meeting. So it depends. It's dependent upon the person who's trying to organize the meeting to follow up with town staff, because we don't know when someone has taken time off, and they legitimately get time off. But we don't know when that is. And so if I just throw it over the wall and say, here, Miranda or Pam or whoever, post this for me, and they're not there, and I don't follow up, then we're not legally warned and we shouldn't be meeting. And the same is true with the minutes. I have seen cases where committees have sent minutes to the town manager's office. They were missed. They didn't get posted on time. And so they were not in compliance. So my question is, how do we thread that needle?
Right. So my comment is, so I would say, like, I'm this close to wholeheartedly agreeing with Pam. The linchpin is staff. Like, committees can't do their business without the commitment and dedication of staff. And we have brilliant affordable housing advocates, but we can still not manage a grant if we don't have a planner. We have democratically informed citizen groups who want to see sidewalks, but we can't get it through without staff. And so for me, like, we can create a handbook, but we really have to imagine as a board ways to say, no, this town value, the work of this commission can't happen because we don't have the staff resources, or hey, here is what we're going to do differently amongst our staffing to make sure that the work that you create in your groups is manifested. Like, I really believe that. That's what I heard today. My reticence was because I was concerned that we didn't have the capacity as a town, and that we would lose or become discouraged in this process for finding housing. And so it's not just like, oh, somebody needs to follow up with a staffer. It's that, like, the staff need to have the capacity and the time, and quite frankly, the resources and money, right, their salaries potentially, to do this work. And that's just what it is. So this plan, this handbook, needs to be imagined on how these committees are going to interact with staff. And quite frankly, you should be writing a handbook for how appropriately and kindly to interact with staff as well, right? It's not, you just don't send an email and say, like, did you post my thing? It's just like, hello, dear staff point person, like, are you able to post this thing? And so again, my lawn and we can't accomplish anything in this town if we don't figure out how these bodies are going to interact with our staff in a meaningful way. That's just it.
Point taken. Pam, is your hand just stuck up, or it's down? Okay, good. All right. That's a lot, ladies and gentlemen, and I have some more ideas for the handbook based on all of this, and we'll keep plugging away. Meanwhile, Brennan hopefully is advertising for another person in his office.
Marcia, can I just ask one question?
Yes, you may, Jan.
I would just like, and I'm sure other commissions and committees would like an outline of your timetable for the handbook. So are you asking other groups formally for input? If so, when do you want the responses back? And what's the schedule for bringing this together, the handbook itself?
Well, basically, I was doing this the hard way. I was, as usual, I was getting stuff from the web and, whatever I picked up from minutes and that sort of thing. So I hadn't wanted to yet ask people for more because I wanted to have a start that I could share with people and say, this is what I've got. Would you all like to please look at this and get it back to me by such and such a date? But I don't think it's fair to just say, so tell me about yourself. I wanted to have something in writing, and that's what I'm trying to do. I think I'm fairly close, but I've got some things that, that were brought up tonight that I think would be helpful. When I show this to the board again and they say, yeah, it looks like it's ready for prime time, I can then ask if they're willing to send it out to the various groups. And then at that time, we'll set up a timeline. I mean, obviously, I think that this is an important document that we need to get sort of hammered out because all of the stuff that we've talked about tonight intersects with, the work that we're doing. And if it's all sort of crystallized in one place, it helps everybody. So there's some urgency, but I can't say a timeline yet. Okay.
Yes, thank you. That really gets to my point, and I appreciate the importance of this, and it helps to get a draft out. But it sounds like you're doing it in a thoughtful fashion that will give groups time to respond to something concrete.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, because of open meeting law, we're not doing this. We're not making the sausage off in a room by ourselves. I'm doing this on my own when I get time and bring it to everybody. So all of that open meeting law stuff slows down things, but I think we're getting ready to pick up the speed. Okay.
If I could comment, Priscilla, this is such a tremendous amount of work, which apparently you have done by yourself. And it was illuminating to me because I've never seen it all organized and put together in such a consistent format. And it's really helpful.
Good. It's a start.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, you're going to have an opportunity to critique.
I don't know if I want to work that hard.
All right. So we are now, I believe, at number 9, which is 8, preparation for public meetings. So for this, and this is about use of the surplus funds that were not previously budgeted, but which we have. As you know, we have 2 public meetings planned, Wednesday, January 17 at 6:30 and Saturday, January 20 at 2 p.m. both here in the Tracy Hall meeting room. The purpose of the public meetings is to hear the voters' preference for how we will use our surplus funds. To that end, I've enclosed 2 documents with the packet tonight to assist our discussion. One is a draft agenda for January 17, and the other is the items or projects that we discussed at our last select board meeting for possible use of that surplus money. I included this only to remind us what we discussed and to serve again as a jumping off point for decisions tonight. You will remember that we had agreed to go to the public meetings with our proposed ideas for use of the surplus money, and our ideas may or may not become warrant articles because we're going to listen to the public ideas and make a final decision on January 24th at our select board meeting. So taking the documents in order, if you look at the draft agenda, it's basically got 2 items on it. The architect's presentation of their draft report on Tracy Hall, and then the select board recommendations. So the way I envision this, Brennan's talked with the architects, and I believe they're expecting to do a presentation, and we were anticipating like an hour with them doing a presentation and then people in the public being able to ask questions. And we can talk about this, but it seemed to me that it might make sense for those questions to be just from the public. If there was time for select board questions at that time, we could ask them, or, we could send them to Brennan. I'm not sure. We can talk about that. And then after that, I envisioned that we would, maybe put up here on the board, whatever warrant articles we had proposed for use of those surplus monies, so that they're just sort of here for people to look at. But then we simply listen to what people have to say, because they're going to have comments. And Brennan has kindly agreed to come along and be note taker on the 17th. So with that sort of idea, what do you have for comments? And Brennan, did I misrepresent anything? Go ahead, Brennan.
Well, just the expectation for the architect's public meeting. So I spoke with the head architect, who I think will have more than himself there on the 17th. And what we had asked them to do in the RFP was to hold a public meeting and really to facilitate not just a presentation of here's what we think, but more of a fact gathering, come to this meeting and be able to talk about what you see as the uses of Tracy Hall, or what this could be in the future, or what are the problems that we see now. So within that hour, and I told them, that's what we'll allocate. And if it's less than that, that's fine. And if it goes a little over, that's probably not the end of the world either. Would be, we'll certainly warn this as a public engagement, where we would hope that if there are people interested in Tracy Hall specifically, they would want to come to the meeting and again talk and speak about their thoughts, and that will get put into the discussion and kind of the more formal presentation pieces that will come out of this. And I think, certainly the select board participating at that time is probably the right time to do this, because I don't know that we'll have another real opportunity to ask questions or make comments real time. So
Brennan,
just to define that.
Do you think an hour for all of that is enough?
I don't know how much public participation we may have. I think we should put an hour on the agenda, and again, if it's a little less or a little more, we'll have some wiggle room there. But I tend to think an hour is probably going to be fine.
Okay.
So I'm a little confused. Can I ask some questions?
Yeah.
So there's one of the deliverables, or one of the things that the contract states is that there'll be a public presentation, or
that's to come. But so we're going to have 3 meetings really. They've come to Tracy Hall, they've interviewed staff, they've toured the facility, they've taken the diagrams, and they're working on kind of creating some electronic deliverables there. Also, they were going to have a public meeting, which I think we all agreed to was when the general public, not affiliated with Tracy Hall, would come in and say, this is our building, this is our town hall, this is what we'd like to see or what we don't want to see. And that's what we're doing on the 17th. And then there will be a final, once everything has been compiled and more work has been done, there will be a kind of a presentation of here's what we think could be the plan. And that will be, again, some discussion around, does that make sense or not?
So I guess my confusion, so these meetings, which are part of that work, are being discussed also as part of the surplus and potential warrant to use the surplus, or
this is a standalone. We had a meeting on the 17th. This is talking about Tracy Hall. The warrant piece is standalone, although we're aware that Tracy Hall and investment may be a part of that.
Okay.
So there is a benchmark between the two, and they're not mutually exclusive here.
Okay. I think I understand. So we're not talking, the question of what should we do with the surplus is not the same as this architectural meeting from the public. It's just, the only reason we're talking about them is because they're both upcoming meetings.
It's in the same meeting. So we're going to do both of these. We're going to have 2 agenda items. The first is going to be the discussion of Tracy Hall with our architect. And the second is going to be this discussion of warrants for surplus funding. And that could be a discussion of Tracy Hall, because we're not going to have a final study before the discussion of the warrant needs to go onto the ballot. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm I'm confused about the messaging of it. But okay.
If we had an extra night in our busy schedules, another Wednesday, we could have done it on a separate night, but we thought it would make sense to do both of these during that special meeting on the 17th.
It's just a little disingenuous to say, like, here's a public meeting where we're going to sort of scrum for your thoughts about the building so we could come back and like inform our presentation. And then also, do you want to use money for that? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like obviously they go together, but it's like, we're interested in your thoughts, but we really need to engage in this process so we can then justify spending money. Like,
Well, I don't know if it's saying justified, but I think maybe to be less disingenuous, we could say something like reports. I mean, really, Brennan, is there a report to be submitted yet, or should it be just architect's presentation? And what? And they're soliciting opinions, right?
Yeah, I'd call it a public engagement about Tracy Hall. I think that's how we have.
Okay.
I had envisioned it at least. So yeah, I think there's nothing that they're particularly going to report out on yet for people to sit and listen to, although they might say, here's what we've done to date. This is really a chance that we had talked about. I mean, if the majority of the board feels like Roger, that this is kind of combining two things and it might be inappropriate, we could do it a different time. I could tell them the 17th is not going to work now. We'd have to find another time to do it.
My question is just, should we really be coupling the surplus money and the potential warrant request with a public presentation that is intended to genuinely get feedback for our project? But I mean, well, people can work through, like, we should work through that discomfort too. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. I'll stop. Thanks.
Yeah. We could have an intermission and everyone could file out if they don't want to talk about the warrants, or come later if they don't want to hear about Tracy Hall.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay. Sorry. Thanks.
I'll make cupcakes and everybody goes for a cupcake break. So architect's presentation and public engagement regarding Tracy Hall. How's that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you could probably take the presentation piece out of that and just say architects seeking public comment and an engagement on Tracy Hall.
Listening session. Okay. All right. And then the second item is the select board recommendations for use of surplus funds. And that's where I was envisioning we put those, whatever we decide tonight, put it up on the wall, and then we just listen to people. Pam, you've had your hand up for a while. You want to make a comment?
Yes, thank you. I think that it's important to hear about Tracy Hall because we do have some surplus funds. And, well, we may not get any kind of estimate of what it will cost to deal with all of the issues. It'd be nice to start hearing about what some of these issues are and potential solutions. I was concerned that we got the RFP out so late that we wouldn't hear anything before we were looking at articles for the town warrant. It sounds like at least we'll get some information before we make those decisions. So I think it's important for us to follow through and hear the architects, whatever they have to share with us, or whatever questions they might like to have the public answer. So I would very much advocate keeping the architect's presentation on the agenda for the 17th.
Thank you. Mary?
I think too, it is important to hear from the architects. I don't want to lose track of the other uses for the surplus, including, I think the fire department has some needs. And also I'm wondering, because since this happens in the same week, we have our other meeting on the 20th, if that theme is going to be just general use of surplus funds, or, probably wouldn't have the architect aspect to it. And
right.
just thinking of the, I think we did want to offer that in a non-evening slot so we could have more participation, but just wondering how, will that be a duplicate of the surplus funding ideas that we have on the 17th, or, will it be a very different kind of meeting? Or just a continuation, I don't know, but they both happen in the same week. One might capture the imagination more, or it might be just that just ends up being an organic kind of thing as far as who participates and what they're interested in. But I think we should listen carefully at both meetings to what, to the conversations that people bring to it.
Yes, and I think we'll have to advertise on the second meeting that it is only going to be about the public talking to us about their ideas for surplus, but also let them know that there's a recording that they can listen to about the architects. In fact,
Good. Yes, thank you. Sounds like a good way to balance it.
okay. Priscilla, did you have something?
I think we need to hear how the architect think too, and, because it does affect how people might think about the surplus. I mean, I have dear friends who've upgraded me and said, you shouldn't be, putting money in to pay down the tax rate. You should be putting all that money aside for Tracy Hall. I'm like, okay, well, that's not what we did,
But there's more money to talk about. All right. Alex, you've had your hand up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess I'm just looking for some clarity at this point, and maybe that's a premature wish. When will we be able to talk about the proposal that we have for the surplus? Would that be on Wednesday after the architect goes, or will that be on Saturday?
Well, what we were going to do was just listen rather than talk about proposals. I don't know how, Brennan, do you have an opinion about that? I mean, I was anticipating the select board would be quite quiet.
Yeah, that doesn't mean necessarily that Alex or Matt or both couldn't come and talk about what they are proposing. I guess we're anticipating that we might have people from the community that might have strong feelings about projects that they'd like to see, and this is a chance for them to kind of voice those. That was the vision that I saw coming out of the select board's discussion, and the opportunity to have two meetings was really just in case people weren't able to get here on Wednesday evening, that they would have a chance on Saturday to come when maybe there's less work conflicts.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't be opposed to having a presentation, but I don't know. What about the rest of you? Mary, your hand was first.
I strongly think the fire department should be sort of scheduled in, because I know Matt talked to us about, there are needs there. And I think the public should have a chance to kind of understand how we're going to balance spending of this surplus between, I don't want to call them conflicting needs, but different needs. So I want them to be heard.
Okay.
Both needs.
Okay. Pam?
Well, I think that they should be available to answer questions. I'm not sure I would make time for a formal presentation, because you also have a proposed article for the DPW garage, and I'm not sure Chris would be available to make a presentation on that. I understand he's on vacation. So, if he's not available to make his case juxtaposed to what the fire department is asking for, is that, the way we want to proceed. So I would say if we can say these are the ideas, and if people have a question and they'd like to ask the police chief or the fire chief or deputy fire chief, then they could be available to answer those questions if somebody had one.
So,
Roger?
I'm now very confused. So, are we having evenings for an open invitation to hear responses or to hear ideas, or are we offering, ideas, thus presentations, and then taking public comment. Like, how is this being facilitated? Like, what is the ultimate goal? It sounds like there's ideas that we have that we want to gauge the temperature on, and that may involve answering some questions and having presentations from staff, or are we truly just listening to ideas and finding ways to incorporate them into the surplus? Like, which one is it?
Well, I mean, that's one of the things that we're talking about tonight. Initially, I think Brennan and I had envisioned this as being a listening session. So, you know, we could say the select board has identified these things which we think would be good vehicles for the surplus, but we want to hear from you. Now, I can envision, you know, and frankly, Chief Northern's suggestion makes me sort of think, oh yeah, of course, people could have questions that I wouldn't be able to answer. But I don't know.
I said this last time. I think it's going to be really depressing for people to say, like, I would like a sidewalk, or I would want a 5th police officer, when this board is not in a position to provide those things to the community, right? Like, we should listen, but I think there is this sort of tension between you're asking people to share what to share and to make an offering, but there may not be like they may not be materially heard in any way, and so I'm much more in favor of identifying needs and providing information and getting feedback. So I think maybe I'm interested in talking about a couple of different ideas, which is why I was talking about Tracy Hall, whether or not, like, is it part of a deliverable on a project, or are we asking, you know, for them to sort of fund or make a decision around it? So is it a listening session and on things that we are putting for our community, or we're truly doing sort of an open floor thing? And if we're doing an open floor thing, what are the ground rules? What are the norms? What can we say with real teeth that we can deliver on? Otherwise, nobody wants to have a listening session where they're not heard, right?
Well, I think it's not so much that we're promising we can deliver on things. It's a matter of saying, we've got this extra money. We could save some of it for the fire department, save some of it for Tracy Hall. You know, where would you like to save some money? It's not that we're saying, you know, it's a measly $1 million or something. That's not going to buy much. So it's, you know what I'm saying? I don't know that. So I'm open to how we do this. I don't want it to be a free for all that everybody leaves feeling dissatisfied.
Right.
Right. I don't want it to, and I think I'd have to make a statement in the beginning to make it clear, this is not a panacea. We're not going to be able to say we're going to solve maybe even one problem if we put all the money toward it. We don't, Tracy Hall might be more than $1 million, right? But in terms of how you want to allocate the money, what projects or savings accounts do you want to see it go to? Now, to that end, if there are departments who want to say things in their sort of in support that explains why it's important, I'm not sure that I'm against that. What does everybody else think? Priscilla?
My assumption was always that we would at least briefly say, and maybe even, you know, from what you said, have them up on the wall, you know, like this, so they can look at it,
right?
Explain why briefly, but basically try to find out from the town, do they think that we as a board are going in the right direction? Are we thinking of things the way they're thinking of them, or have we somehow, you know, maybe somebody will say, you're just listening to department heads and you're not listening to townspeople. And there is perhaps a disconnect there. I hope not, but there could be. And we need to find out, you know, kind of how we're doing, you know, and make it clear to them that we're not saying we're going to give you everything you want. And you realize we're not saying we can give you anything at all. In particular, we're here to listen to you because we want to find out, are we thinking about things correctly? Is our emphasis, does it need to shift a little bit? You know,
We lost the plot.
yeah, or have we lost you guys? Have we
Right.
gotten so busy with running the town that you guys are sort of out there saying, well, this isn't what I want.
Pam, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I just want to kind of add to what Priscilla just said. Maybe what we need to do is say, here are some ideas. If you agree with them, how would you prioritize them? Would you put Tracy Hall at the top of the list, at the bottom of the list, in the middle? You know, how would you prioritize where this money will go? Because as you said, Marcia, it's $1 million and it's not going to solve all the problems that we have, but we have to recognize that this is the money that belongs to the taxpayers of this town. And we need to hear from them how they might like to see us prioritize the needs that are identified.
Thank you.
So,
Brennan, Roger, do you have a follow?
So it just, so it's clear. So what I'm hearing is that we're going to be presenting a set of ideas that we would like people to discuss and hear feedback on, potentially prioritize. So like what the surplus conversation is, like we are leading with the ideas.
What I had done simply was on this.
I saw that, yeah.
Okay. Just basically say, this is what we talked about before. Do we want to put big posters up here and say, you know, these are the things that the select board thinks merits use of this surplus? Go ahead and talk to us about what you think, right? Now, to some extent, that's a little bit open-ended, but it could be prefaced by, we can't solve all of the problems. We can't say, you know, we can build a sidewalk around the whole town, or we, you know, because that's not something that the select board can do on its own and not with $1 million. But we have this money, and I don't know that we want to say prioritize it or not. I think what we're looking for is a sense. Brennan, can you help me out here? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I guess that's what we had talked about at the last budget meeting, right? So we had $1.8 million of surplus, which was a windfall for the town in an extraordinary situation. The board agreed that $700,000 of that was going to get put towards buying down our tax rate for the citizens of the town. Everybody agreed that that's going to go on to the ballot and that'll get voted on with the budget. So we were left with this $1.1 million that we needed to have allocated, because it was a surplus, into different categories where it could be used. So that's where we are. Again, at the beginning of the meeting, we talked about, we also have this 0.1, right? This $100,000 that we had encumbered for police department equipment last year in fiscal year 23, that was part of that surplus that didn't get spent in fiscal year 23. So my suggestion, again, and maybe we could just get a consensus here, is that we don't have $1.1 million right now. We have an even $1 million that we're talking about. You know, that's an approximation, but that's, I think, a good round number. And in that $1 million, we have a bunch of competing ideas for the use of the funds. And so we, as the administrators of the town, are going to give the taxpayers whose money this is a chance to talk about what they think a good uses would be. And the select board, to help facilitate that, is going to come up with a number of ideas that came out of that meeting a month ago that we all thought were appropriate uses. And one of those might be the fire department equipment. One of those might be the DPW facility improvements. One of those might be Tracy Hall. You know, those are the three that are popping into my head. And from these two public listening meetings, we're going to come back on the 24th and be able to say, here's what we heard. You know, this isn't going to be perfect and it's not going to make everybody happy, but this is what we're going to put onto the ballot in a warrant for people to vote on.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, this is great. I have a clear sense of how this is going to be facilitated, and I have a clear sense of that these are now the ideas that were presented in the packet are going to be in turn presented. And so, yes, I welcome information and a presentation on one of those ideas from staff. And I think actually maybe all of the ideas should have like a little bit of mini intro I like the idea that they'll be all around the room. People can walk around, you can convene them, you can open the floor. So this is wonderful. So it's clear to me. So thanks. It's clear to me now. So thank you, Marcia and Brennan. It took a long time for me to figure out how this is working. I feel good.
Was that, again, did everybody else on the board kind of think along those same lines? Because if we're off the mark here, let's talk about it. But that was the original thought that I had, and Marcia had.
We have to be open to the possibility that we can say, we as a board, being more intimately involved than most of you with, what the town's needs are. We think this would be a good idea, but it may come out that people say, you haven't done anything about that sidewalk. You haven't done anything about an additional police officer. We would really rather see those funds go there. In which case, I don't know, maybe we say to them, I don't know, maybe the timing doesn't work. Draw an article. I don't know.
Well,
I mean, those things may not have gone. I mean, that could happen.
Yeah.
I mean, it could happen.
Brennan will take notes and we will digest all of this information from the 17th and the 20th. And then we get to make the awful decision.
And we get to think personally, because we can't talk to each other between meetings, think about what we heard at the first one and a few days later, having mulled it, go into the second one and listen some more.
Right. So, Roger, did you say that you thought little presentations would be good?
I did, especially because it's clear to me that we're going to be presenting some ideas. And so people need some more info before they can feel like they can react or comment. So, yes.
And do you feel presentations are good?
Yes, keep them short.
Okay, Mary.
I think yes, but keep them mini.
Pam?
I would say maybe 5 minutes. And like I said earlier, in fairness, I'd like to have the DPW on hand to support their request.
Well, we have their supervisor, and if they want to, they can put it through the supervisor.
Okay.
All right, so we have a consensus. So there'll be a time for you folks in the departments to do what you want, but please keep it brief. Matt, did you want to add something? Your hand's been up a while.
Oh, yeah, sorry, but actually you just concluded essentially my question. So we will do just a super brief presentation, and that will let people, be a little bit more informed if you were querying them for sort of like ranking priorities, or at least in the same way that a Tracy Hall presentation before this, gives plenty of information to people about, why the priorities of Tracy Hall are important. The other departments or people will be able to give information about essentially, why they think that their priorities are also important. And I just wanted to mention that at least speaking from the fire department, the $300,000 that we were talking about actually makes a really significant difference in our capital planning for apparatus in the next 10 years. And I would guess that at least that the 200,000 for public works, for culverts and everything, would also jump them forward in a significant jump at a time where, the environment's changing pretty quickly, and there should be a priority to appropriately change out culverts and all of that. So so even though like $1 million in the scope of a huge redo project for Tracy Hall might be a smaller amount, to like a less significant amount, I think in some of the other instances, like for fire and public works, even the $200,000 or $300,000, will actually make a very significant difference. And that's an awesome opportunity. That is the super upside of having this problem, which is that the select board has this great opportunity to really reset some things in a good way.
Mm-hmm. And maybe, I think it was Roger who suggested it, but maybe we could figure out on the day, you could have a little, sidebar place where you could be talking to anybody who had additional questions after your presentation so that we could, you know, if you just hang around.
That'd be great.
Okay. All right. So now I think we should get to the meat, which is the 5 items that I had captured from the minutes.
Marcia, there are 4. This one was a repeat.
Well, I thought so too, except that I had seen a little note about solar panels that you and Pam had mentioned in regard to Tracy Hall. And I didn't know if that should be just like somehow captured separately or it all just lumps into Tracy Hall. So let's start with the first one. And also I want to know if people have changed their minds and they think of something else that they want to put money towards. So the first one was the fire apparatus fund 6. That's the $300,000. I assume we want to keep that one in as an option?
Yes.
I mean, it assumes that the town of Norwich is satisfied with all of the current fire apparatus. Right. So it assumes that all of these fire apparatus have intrinsic value, strategically factor into the work that they do, and that conversation may or may not have taken place on this board level. I'm fine with it, but
okay.
You know, who's to assume that all of these fire apparatus are needed for our, you know, like what evidence are you going to show the community for that? So we can just defer to our department, and they will provide how the current apparatus is important to the work and strategy of their department.
Okay.
But this board has never discussed that.
All right, so I agree. Pam, you're the last remaining. Do you agree? Is this one of the things you put up?
I don't quite know how to respond to that, Marcia. I see Tracy Hall as our main issue right now for money, and some of these things like fire equipment, I would see us maybe getting a short-term loan to pay for those things if we get to the point where we need them before we have accumulated enough money in the fund. Tracy Hall would have to be a bond if we go well beyond what we have available, and bonds are very expensive, like mortgages. You can spend 2 to 3 times the amount of money paying off the bond. So I'm on the fence on some of these things. I'm just
Pam, hold on. I'm not asking you for a decision. I'm asking you, we need to put some things up on the board to just say to people, these are the things that the board thinks might be reasonable. So 4 of us think that this is one of those. Do you want that up on the board or not? I mean, we've got a majority, but I'm just trying to capture. It's not a vote.
I think it should be something that's discussed with the community, yes.
Okay, good. Second one is Fund 8 Highway Garage. Voters approve the use of $200,000 for the current surplus for the Fund 8 for the DPW garage. Yes or no, up on the board?
I'd say yes.
Okay, Roger?
Yes, but yes.
Okay. Pam, same question?
I think all of these ideas need to be discussed with the community, and I'm not sure why we're going through them one by one.
Well, because I'm trying to make sure everybody's clear. If you don't want to go through them and everybody's read them, we can skip right over this and say these are the ones that are going to go on the board.
I guess I wish we discussed all of these more, but ultimately, look, like, you know, we've reached the time where we need to ask others. But like, you know, I want to be prepared to be able to explain in great fidelity why each of these things is so important, and I want to be a ruthless advocate for each of them. And I am not. My knowledge is not where it should be for at least these first 2. I'm a little more secure with the highway garage than I am the fire apparatus. But so I'm just the presentation of these should be very illuminating for all.
Yeah, and we discussed these before in our prior meetings. So that's where this list came from. It's from us. And we will have the experts from the fire department there to talk about Fund 6. And I think Brennan can adequately describe what's going on in the highway garage.
Right.
So Pam, did you have something to add?
I did. Part of the problem is that we didn't really have a in-depth discussion of the capital plan through the budgeting process. It keeps getting kind of, brushed aside. We kind of touch on it. We didn't really adopt a new capital plan. We're supposed to go through this every year, update it, and adopt the capital plan for the next 5 years. So in absence of that, we got these suggestions from the staff. These are not board priorities. These are staff priorities that came to us through the budget process. So in lacking a capital plan that this board has thoroughly discussed and has adopted, I think we're just flying by the seat of our pants here.
Well, I actually think that we were listening to the people on the ground who are doing the work, and we put things together in the form of, a plan that was represented by our financial office. So I'm really confident that we've got that going forward. And I don't know how this board could really decide much more differently than the people that we've hired to do the work.
It's true. We would reach the same conclusion ultimately.
I think a more thorough explanation of the capital plan in the format that the fire department has presented to us time and time again from every department was what I've been asking for months. And we didn't get that. We didn't have a thorough discussion. And so I don't really feel like we have a roadmap. I know I don't feel like I have a roadmap.
Well, some of us are more confident in that feeling. Mary, would you like to add something?
I'm just looking at the packet. I'm seeing the Fund 6 fire apparatus, Fund 8 highway garage. I'm seeing generators. I'm seeing Tracy Hall Fund listed twice. I'm hearing that, remembering that we did have some mention of culverts. So I just want to know, I think you mentioned 5 items on this list, Marcia.
Yeah,
So-
and the one is Tracy Hall appears twice because just at the end of our discussion in the minutes, you can see both Pam and Priscilla mentioned solar panels. And I thought it was with regard to Tracy Hall, but it wasn't terribly clear. So I threw that in there because it needed some work.
Okay, but I believe at the beginning of this discussion, you were talking about a list of 5 items. So
Right.
What are all of them?
Well, Fund 13, as you said, comes up.
Tracy Hall, okay.
And so there's 4, but I don't know what you do with solar panels. Do they just get lumped in with Tracy Hall or are they for somewhere else? And Roger had mentioned generators as his list. And so I didn't exactly know what to do with that. So I just put it in there.
So if I can just recap a little bit, fire apparatus, Tracy Hall, the DPW garage, generators, and you were saying possibly solar.
Yeah, but I don't know where.
That might be part of the highway garage, perhaps, I don't know. And then there's culverts, right?
No, we're talking about the $1 million surplus. The culverts was part of the previous surplus
Okay.
package.
Okay, thank you. It's confusing.
A lot of surplus.
Yes, maybe that's enough items, I don't know.
So if we think culverts are handled, that's why they
Okay,
didn't.
culverts are off, okay.
Now, what about solar panels, Priscilla?
No, it's not. Actually, I was thinking, going back to Mary's idea of build a pole barn with solar panels at the highway department, but I would think Fund 13, Tracy Hall, wouldn't that be based on, instead of this stuff, wouldn't that be based on what we decide to do after the architects have finished giving us some ideas about what should be done? I don't know why we're saying, well, we think should be done, having not heard from the architects.
Yeah, it's a savings account, and this says for improvements.
Yeah, well, why don't we just keep it that vague?
All right,
You know,
so
put that towards Tracy Hall. We don't know what's happening. I mean, it should be there once, but.
So let's scratch off, well, this was like a way for me
It's
to
okay. I appreciate it.
So let's just say now, we've got 4, okay? Brennan, do you want to clarify something?
I was just going to say, I think we're in the same position with the DPW garage, really. I mean, there's not a lot of specificity we're going to have until we have someone come in there and really look at this and come up with numbers. So, we're going to try to do a quick presentation, but I don't know what people are anticipating for some of these. I think the fire department is different because they're going to have a lot of detail and it's very well thought out. But some of this is really just, we want to sock away some funds so that when we're ready to move on any of these, we have them and make a decision about where that million gets split in that way.
Okay. So Pam, do you have one last comment on this? Raise your hand up. I know, Alex, I'll get to you. I'm trying to get through the board.
I wanted to give some clarification on the solar panels. If I recall correctly, Priscilla and I were saying that if one of the solutions for heating Tracy Hall ended up being doing some cold weather heat pumps or whatever they're technically called, that it might be prudent to also invest in solar to help offset the cost of running electric heat pumps.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, Alex.
Sorry, I guess I'm still confused, and I just want a little bit of more of a granular clarity about how long our presentation should be. I've heard 5 minutes, then I've heard, kind of alluding to a short presentation. Is it 5 minutes or is it 5 to 10? What are we talking so that we can plan and know how much time we have?
Right. I don't think that there's going to be any presentation on Tracy Hall because there isn't one to be had. I don't know who's going to talk about generators, if anybody. So that leaves the highway garage, and Brennan's just said that there's not too much that probably can be added to that. So, I mean, how much time do you think you need? 15 minutes?
Oof. Well, 15, well, that's rather generous. I think we could probably do it. We could do it in 5. I just wanted to make sure that, there's one number out there that everybody who's going to talk knows that they have, rather than, everybody kind of shooting from the hip. So we're good with 5 minutes. If that's the rule, then that's good.
Okay. Board, do you think 5 minutes is good?
Yes.
Nod, Mary, Roger. Can't see Pam.
Yes.
Yes, if Alex is comfortable with that, then that's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think, Roger, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I would like, quite frankly, I would just want like a nice PowerPoint presentation in a PDF that I could read quietly alone in my home. But if that's me if I were a citizen, that's, but if we can't provide that, that's fine. It will take some work.
This is about community. We're all going to get together.
Yes. But some people like to come prepared for their meeting, right?
All right. So, Alex and Matt, I would say you're comfortable with 5 minutes. If you go 6, nobody's going to complain. And we'll make an announcement that you'll be like in some corridor or someplace, maybe out by the stairs if people want to ask more questions. How's that?
Well, if people want to discuss these things, we're not saying they can't discuss them. They should be able to discuss them on the floor. And if the matter here, they could answer because they're here too.
Yeah. We'll play it by ear. The idea is, I think mostly we wanted to hear from people, but obviously if they have questions, then it's great if you're willing to be there to answer them. Okay? So board members, are we comfortable with the 4 things that are on here? Oh, Matt, you have one more comment?
Will we be able to just put up a slide or two?
Roger's really excited about a slide.
Yeah, I'm on board with Roger. I like what Roger, I like, actually, I think that having materials in front of you beforehand is kind of nice, but at least to be able to show people what we're trying to articulate in sort of a spreadsheet that goes from essentially, red to black, is important. And we would probably have a deck of 3 slides.
Okay, Brennan, this is a technical question then. We'll probably have Jam here, right? I'm looking, you guys will be here for that night, will you? It's a public meeting. What day is that? It's the Wednesday, the 17th, and also
A week from tonight.
right, and then Saturday, the 20th at 2 p.m. Okay, they're going to be here. So I guess you can figure that out with them about how you do a PowerPoint.
Well, I was just going to say, we'll be doing a Zoom as well. And so Matt could share his screen, and that would be the PowerPoint on the big teleprompter.
Okay. That sounds good. So
Do you
I
have
guess
any?
you're good to go.
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Matt, I think Matt had a follow-up and then Mary.
Oh, okay, yep.
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Mary?
Are we envisioning these meetings to be in our usual conference space? Like that, probably as far as who would show up, that it's not going to be an enormous amount of people, probably fit in, where you all are at, right?
That's what I was thinking.
Okay.
I mean, I've been here when it was, packed.
Fairly packed.
Yeah.
I know, it's just, it's like planning a party. Like where are the seats going to be, and where's the Zoom going to be, and all that. So.
Right. Well, I'll leave that to Brennan and Jam to figure out. How's that?
Oh boy. Okay.
All right. So we're good with item 8. Now, are we good to move on to number 9, which is preparation for warrant articles? Mary?
Probably not, but yeah, we have to get it done.
Oh, yeah. Okay, for this agenda item, I pulled out Joyce's proposed warrant articles from one of her last PowerPoint presentations, and I asked Brennan and Miranda to include Joyce's draft fund account glossary, which is my new favorite thing. And because it lists every fund with corresponding purpose and source of fund, if she could find it. And it's helpful because on page 34, which is page 90 of the packet, she's recommending some housekeeping articles, which you can read and compare with the language in the glossary. So on this slide, 36 or 35, 34, I believe what she's recommending is changing the purpose language for funds 10, 16, and 25 so that they're more clear, and closing funds 47 and 49 as they are no longer necessary or appropriate. So, yes, Roger?
So I asked this to Joyce, and so I assume she looked into it, but I think VLCT recommends not zero, like they say to zero it out, but they don't say to close it. So this has us closing it, right? So that doesn't really matter because this is all going to go to council anyway, right? So it's fine.
Well, that's a good point. Is it going to go to council?
It should. It really should, I think.
Okay. Brennan, is that something that you're familiar with, the answer that Joyce came up with about closing versus zeroing?
I kind of remember having the conversation in a budget meeting, but I think maybe VLCT would be a better resource than council because I mean, we're not going to have much time here as well. So whatever we're going to have on our warrant, we're going to have approved on the 24th, deadline 25th. And I mean, we can look into this, try to look into this kind of quickly. I'm not sure why, Roger. Do you remember the discussion, or was it your concern?
I know, I remember that the recommendation was to zero it out but not close it, and I assumed that was for best practice that I am not aware of. So that's.
I remember hearing it the same way as Roger.
Zero.
Well, we have Barry on the call still. I think she's there. We could certainly ask her to kind of look into that and make sure that we're doing that appropriately. I would think if it was something that could come back at some point, you certainly wouldn't want to close it out because you'd have to rebirth it. But if it's just something, and I can't remember exactly what those two were, if they're never ever going to reoccur, I'm not sure why we wouldn't just get rid of them.
Okay, so Barry and you will look into those on page 34. The current fund.
Unless Barry knows something right off the top of her head that she wants to share, but I don't really remember the exact
Barry?
articles.
I don't recall either. I was thinking it might have been something to do with the accounting software as well, but I'll look into it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not insisting on that, by the way. I'm just whatever you want to do.
Well, we should do the right thing, whatever it is. So we'll hold off on this, and shall we all agree that whatever it is that Barry and Brennan find out is what we will do? Either it'll go on the warrant or it won't. Yes? No?
As far as closing or zeroing, that's that piece of it?
That's
Okay.
right.
Well, if it's zeroing or closing, I'd like clarity on that. But
okay.
These other articles, not all of this has to do with closing or zeroing.
No.
This section.
So Fund 10, 16, and 25, it looks like what she's talking about is changing the purpose language to be more clear. So, and moving. Closing and moving too.
Well, 10 would be one of those, because don't we have a public safety fund for the police station now? Isn't that the
that's what I.
So, I mean, zeroing would just hold them there if we need to think about this more. And then on the dam, the surroundings of the dam are still there and, available for minimal use, not as a pool, but so, maybe zeroing might be just prudent as far as any of these.
Okay. So if it's allowed, that would be prudent.
So that 10, 16 was the dam, 25 is the fire station. Okay.
I was just going to add, I know when Joyce went through this exercise, I think her priority there, her reasoning was that we wanted to clean these up a little bit, and this was going to be the chance to have the voters do that. So if we're just going to zero them, I don't think they don't need to be a warrant. I wouldn't think. It's just
right, but then we get back to the
there.
question of should they be closed or not. And
right.
Barry said maybe it has to do with NEMRIC or something like that.
They do have to be a warrant article if you're zeroing them out, because you have to move whatever money is
if there's money in them
to another fund. And on page 35, she gives more information about what she's proposing that we do. Shall the voters move the all remaining money from Fund 10, the police station fund, to the Fund 47, the Public Safety Facility Fund? So yes, you do have to have an article to move money because these funds are created by town vote.
Right. I don't think all of them had balances, though. That's what I was saying.
But she does specify that on page 35. She talks about remaining money being moved.
Yes.
In 10 and in 16. 25 is a renaming, it looks like. and a restatement of the purpose of Fund 47. So all of these would need to be articles on the town warrant as housekeeping articles.
Does everybody agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with this sort of row, which is moving money and sort of clearly defining the purpose. I don't think any of these have to do with closing funds.
Okay, so the proposed funds to transact by article request, page 35, we all agree that those should go on the warrant.
Yes.
Yes.
Anybody who disagrees, speak up.
I think this is fine. I think I remembered also that the question to close is a separate question than the movement of, but I don't remember, and this is why looking at but Miranda would know. I'm sorry, I'm doing it, but you guys can do this. Sorry, this is great.
All right, so Lily's putting this together.
Okay.
So we'll Lily, that's on the warrant. Page 34, we're waiting for more information from Barry and Brennan as to 47 and 49, which are on page 34. 47 is Public Safety Facility Fund. Borrowing article.
That was on the next page that we said we'd approve. It's changing the purpose.
Okay, I see what you did. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's look at page 36. That's a closure. So we're going to talk about, Brennan and Barry are going to talk about that.
Well, that's the ARPA one.
That's the ARPA one, yeah.
And then the to be determined, the culvert fund and the roadway and pedestrian safety. So let's talk about roadway and pedestrian safety.
I kind of know where that came out of, unless it was a sock to the people who want a sidewalk or something.
No, that was, as I recollect, and Brennan can chime in on this obviously, but I believe that was recommended by Chris so that he could do more work on basically making roads safe.
Okay, all those things specified.
Is that right, Brennan?
Yeah, I think there wasn't a good fit there maybe for some of the projects, and that was the reasoning behind that.
Yeah. So how do people feel about that one? Yes or no?
I'd say yes to that one.
Does it need to be a fund? Why couldn't you just do this in operating?
I agree with Roger.
Well, if I recall, it was ability to kind of plan, like a capital planning required a fund versus just kind of every year kind of shooting from the hip with what you had.
But then every time he wants to spend money, he has to come back to the select board to get that money approved because it's a reserve fund. If it's operating funds and it's under the limits that you can approve, he can go to you and say, I need to, hire somebody to clear these trees or put up this guardrail or whatever, and you can approve it. It's adding a layer of bureaucracy that I don't think we need.
Well, is a tree a capital asset? Like,
yeah, I think it is actually. They're valuable.
Well, I guess we all love trees, but I'm versus a guardrail.
Yeah, well,
and we're taking down dead trees, Mary. They have no value.
Okay, a tree does have value. Clearing trees is not. It's like, what do you call it?
Barry, can you shed some light on this?
Look into it.
Barry, can you save us here?
You asking Barry or Mary?
Barry. If you can save us, Mary, that's good too.
Oh, can't do it.
What is the question? I'm sorry.
The question, Barry, is about the roadway and pedestrian safety fund to be created potentially. There's a question about why this shouldn't just come out of the operating fund so that there wouldn't be an extra layer of bureaucracy where we, the select board, have to approve every expenditure.
So I think the question falls back to why Chris wanted it that way. What was his intent? Was there something is there a reason why he needed it to be separate?
That's what we're trying to discern. And Chris isn't here and Joyce isn't here. And my recollection was it was to allow for long-term planning. So you could be putting money into this over time. Pam has pointed out that yes, but the drawback of that is you have to come back to the select board every time you want to withdraw funds. But that's my recollection. And again, Chris is not here until middle of next week, so maybe we should ask him.
Or just delete everything after such as, like, just say, like, it needed to ensure adequate safety for our roadways. It's the examples that give me pause.
But you still have to come to the select board for approval for everything.
Understood.
Let's hear from Chris next week. How's that?
Yeah.
Mary?
Okay, just one more tidbit. Just when our ash borer tsunami hits, we might want that fund to be large. So maybe the intent is to sort of seed it with 10,000, but then try to build it up in case we have to suddenly, really deal with a lot of trees all at once. But I agree that talking to Chris would be the best.
Yeah.
We have an ash borer fund.
I had actually suggested
that's true
about moving the ash borer, if that's what, because it did to me seem linkage, but I think we need to go back to Chris.
Yeah, good point.
Okay. So that's on hold until we hear from Chris. And then the last one is the culverts fund. Shall we approve the creation of that? That one to me makes a lot of sense. Anybody else?
Agreed.
I mean, this wording is wild. The purpose to allocate and track expenses.
Shall the voters participation of the culverts fund with the purpose of
Fixing culverts.
Purchase, repair, and replacement of culverts. How's that?
I think what Chris was saying was that he wanted to break this away from bridges to have more accountability for culverts. I'm not sure that I would agree that that's a necessity, but it's up to the board whether we want to have that kind of granularity or if we just want culverts and bridges as one category for a reserve fund.
Well, I'm convinced that with 1,000 culverts, we need its own savings account. Mary, what's your thought?
Yeah, I was also remembering the 1,000 culverts figure, which does not include driveway culverts, and knowing that we just have more water that's flowing through with these, big rain events. So to get kind of a handle on the scale of what's needed, I think Chris is just trying to figure it out. How much? Yeah. So yeah, I support it.
Okay, so that's me, Priscilla, Mary, and anybody else?
I would just say this all just needs editing. I would say, like, shall the voters approve the creation of a corporation with the purpose to allocate and track expenses? Like, shall the voters allocate $150,000 for the purposes of? I don't know. It's fine.
How about shall the voters approve the creation of a culverts fund with the purpose to purchase, repair, and replace culverts in the town's jurisdiction and fund this with $150,000?
Yeah, that's cleaner.
I guess my general comment would be that town staff will look this over and like make the writing cleaner and potentially, like, I'm not sure I don't think it's a necessarily good practice to say all remaining funds, for example, like, but it might be fine. I don't know.
Okay. Brennan can work
figure it out.
All right. And Pam, what was your feeling on culverts?
I'm not sure it's necessary to have that kind of granularity.
Okay. So it's 4 of us are in favor of it. All right, so we can say that that one's going to go on the warrant and the rest of them are works in progress. Is there anything else that wasn't in this packet that people think should be a warrant article? This is not your last chance, but the 24th will be.
So I might, so the performance, the operational and performance fund, I confess that I forget the full name of it, but I think we found it very useful. It's been used. And I would advocate for replenishing it for what has been used in it.
Replenish it, okay.
Do we have any idea what Stantec is billing us for Hemlock Road? Or we know what we're paying for the compensation study. We authorized that to come from that fund, and Stantec was also to come from that fund, I think. So we'd have to have some kind of a number on where those landed at the end of the year.
I just think long-range planning is useful and we can use that fund for it. And we already have used it for long-range planning, so.
The purpose under the glossary is from Article 8, March 1, 2022, to support reviews of town operations, technical studies, and meeting grant match requirements as needed.
Great, we should replenish it.
So amount too.
Yeah,
But that's something we could have done in the budgeting because it's a line item now.
Mm-hmm. So is it appropriate to put it in as an article?
It's not required.
Right.
It could have been in the budget.
Mm-hmm.
It still could be in the budget.
Well, it could be one of our suggestions for the surplus.
Yeah, that's my pitch.
So you want it on the big board for one of the.
I think it's worth, I think there was a lot of skepticism about whether or not that fund brought value to our town. And I think this past year has proved that it is used and it is of value. And so we should just share that with our community and hope that they, see its value too.
So wouldn't these, like the 150 for the culverts also come out of the surplus? Otherwise, you're adding it to what's going to be raised in taxes. And it's not part of the budget. It's an article that has to be funded through taxes raised. So do you want to say that comes out of the surplus to get that fund up and running? Or are we going to raise an extra 150 over and above the budget?
Good point. Well, I was thinking over and above, but let's hear what people want to do. So basically, the operational performance fund, the suggestion is to replenish it. I don't know what that means because I don't know what was in it initially, but I don't remember it being huge.
It was 110,000 and we've used some of it, but I don't know how much.
And culverts is extra, but those two are potentially warrant articles to raise the money in addition, or we could put them as surplus usage. To my mind, they don't have the curb appeal that the other items do potentially. So it would seem to me that they would be more likely warrant articles, but
culvert might have some curb appeal.
I think so, yeah.
I would leave culverts as it's been proposed, and I would put I would say $50,000 or $30,000, effectively one study. Let's fund one more future study through that fund, and let's put it in the same section as the culverts.
As the what?
As the culverts.
In other words, raise the taxes to cover it.
Yes, because we are using it. It's valuable.
Okay, so that's what Roger says.
That's what
Anybody? I would agree with that one. Anybody else?
I can't keep straight what Roger said.
Roger's saying he would put in an extra warrant article that says, will you give $30,000 to add to our existing operational performance fund? And will you give $150,000 for this new culvert fund? He would leave them as warrant articles.
Two separate ones.
Two separate
new
ones,
ones.
as opposed to putting them up on the board with all of the other things that we're going to say, this is what we think we should use the surplus for.
So these are extra budget.
Yes, which people could vote for or not.
You know what, I don't care. Sorry.
Okay. Passes. Mary, what do you think?
On Roger's proposal? Yes, I think put it on as a warrant article, see what people think.
Okay, Pam, warrant article or up on the board with surplus?
Well, I think the 30,000 should have been in the budget, and I think the 150 should come out of the surplus.
Okay, so
I'm a no on both of those as separate articles to raise the tax rate.
okay, so Pam's a no, but we've got a majority, so there'll be warrant articles.
They would still raise the tax rate if they were in the budget.
Yep.
Well, you
Okay.
should have thought of it earlier.
Well, we're doing our best, aren't we? So now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't see anything else on my agenda. It's 10 o'clock. If anyone has anything, now is the time to tell us.
I thought we were going to discuss the audit and the
Oh.
finance report. Is that not true?
Thank you very much. Informational items, we have got the audit, and basically those of us who came here tonight received our own personal copy. The rest of you can stop in and pick it up at your leisure. The treasurer had or will have one put in her box, and for everyone else, the report is going to be online either today or tomorrow. It is. Miranda has done it. So everybody can look at the auditor's report, and I believe Brennan can confirm this, that the auditors will appear in person at our first meeting in February. Is that true?
Yeah, we could tell them either meeting in February, really any future meeting, but I figured we'd probably want to get this out before, or have the discussion if there was any before town meeting. So
Right.
I think I had tentatively told him it would be the first meeting in February.
Okay, perfect. So that's that for audits. Then the other informational item is that the November financial reports are in the packet, and as usual, please send any questions to Brennan, which he can discuss with Barry and deal with appropriately. Beyond that, we had reports from fire department, which was sobering because it starts out with cozy fires and fireplaces. But I note that there's a call for volunteers, so I think I hope people respond. IREC tells us that the energy assessment hasn't happened yet. We hope this will be scheduled soon, obviously. But they are working to minimize the cost of the EV charging station at Dan and Witt's, which wasn't operational, but apparently is now. And they're correcting payments from Huntley Meadows, which should have been going to Norwich, but weren't. Unfortunately, we have also heard that Jeff Grout is leaving TRORC.
Oh.
So many thanks to him.
That wasn't in a report.
For good work, but we look forward to hearing about who our new director or coordinator will be. And the rec department report shows a great variety of youth and adult programs for winter. And I confess I had to look up what futsal is, but I now know something new. And I would just say well done to Bree for a selection of activities and community potlucks. The program is really a great resource for Norwich.
Yeah.
So is there anything else, ladies and gentlemen, that needs discussion or you'd like to bring up? Adjourn. Okay, otherwise I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, Mary. Seconded by Priscilla. Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Oh, yes.
And Marcia, yes, it's unanimous. We're adjourned at 10 p.m. exactly, and I